Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show. What followed was a shrill cry that pierced through the sky. Before Stephen and Hutton could react, there was a loud POM, and they saw an Aztec that was caught in the fire rain. It fell from the sky and created a huge dent in the ground. The men could only see blazing fire and sparkles that filled the air. Hutton was the first to be shocked. He shot a cautious glance at the gigantic pit and saw all scales and hideous face. There were also 2 horns on the head, a pair of wings on the ribs, and a pungent smell of sulfur. What could it be other than an Aztec that was close to level 20? However, this Aztec was lying there lifelessly. Its chest had been pierced through by a frost dragon gun. Fresh red blood oozed out of its wound profusely. "Oh God," Hutton exclaimed, his jaw dropped. Profound was the only word he could use to describe the abilities of President Felix. How could he kill a level 18 with just a single strike? It seemed that Senior Adelo was not exaggerating, after all. "Hutton, how much longer can your magical equipment work?" Lin Li asked without even looking at the Aztec in the pit. An Aztec that cast the fire rain would have 3 to 5 seconds of mana depletion. In that 3 to 5 seconds, its magic abilities and defense mechanism would be at their weakest. If his frost dragon gun was unable to kill the Aztec with one strike, he should just pack his luggage and return to Gerosis for retirement immediately. 5 more minutes. Hutton's heart skipped a beat when he heard President Felix's question. The fact that he was asking about the magical equipment and not the spell meant that he had seen through him. The blue projection he had used did not require mana. It was magical equipment that had been passed down for generations in the Manhwa family. What a sharp eye President Felix has. Very good. Lin Li nodded his head and did not say more. He secretly transmitted a bit of mana into the source of mana of the Manhwa array. The introduction of this wave of mana lit up the level 10 magical crystal. Then, the entire maze Manhwa array transformed into a gigantic whirlpool as it tried to absorb the mana within the level 10 magical crystal. Under normal circumstances, such a maze Manhwa array would require an astronomical amount of mana and a magical crystal of at least level 18 to function. The mana within a level 10 magical crystal would be depleted within 5 minutes. However, that was sufficient for Lin Li. From the start, he'd never thought of giving the optimal conditions for the Manhwa array to function. That was the second pit Lin Li had dug. The first pit helped to punish Stephen, while the second one would function to kill the group of Aztecs. 5 minutes should be enough. After one Aztec was struck by the frost dragon gun, close to 10 Aztecs were spreading their red wings and rushing towards the forest. They found the 3 humans as soon as they landed. To the evil beings that lived in the abyss, any living beings that did not belong to the abyss were considered their enemies. They only knew that killing the intruders of the abyss would make their power stronger. That was a battle between the hunter and prey. However, they would only know who was the hunter and prey after the battle. There was neither verbal communication nor psychological tests needed. It was the most primitive and brutal battle from the beginning. It started off with the growl of the biggest Aztec, which signaled the 10 other Aztecs to spread their wings. They swooped towards the 3 young mages like a boiling wave. "We only have 5 minutes," said Lin Li as he prepared his frost dragon gun. What followed was the fall of one of the Aztec in front. However, the frost dragon gun did not kill the Aztec in a single blow this time. After all, it was an Aztec above level 18 that was not undergoing the depletion of mana. This allowed it to use its flame shield against the frost dragon gun. Although the frost dragon gun was powerful, it would be close to impossible for the frost dragon gun to pierce through the flame shield right away. A thunderous POM erupted as the frost dragon gun collided with the flame shield. There was a bunch of dazzling sparks, while the Aztec in the front line had to slow down. Lin Li made use of the opportunity to mutter all his recitations. Immediately, there were 3 walls of ice standing on the ground that was filled with blazing flames. These 3 walls of ice were harder to deal with as compared to the frost dragon gun. Compared to the frost dragon gun that could be countered by the flame shield, these walls of ice obstructed their way. They had to use pyroblast on the walls before moving forward. Time was required for them to cast the pyroblast. The three young mages would never win against the Aztecs with their physical strength. Not to mention Hutton and Stephen, even a smithing master like Lin Li, who had the strength close to a level 15 warrior, would never be able to wrestle with an Aztec. However, it would be another story if he were to use magic. It was a fact that the three young mages standing here were the top mages in the entire Felon Kingdom. If they had sufficient space and time, the lethality of their spells could definitely be described as shocking. Thanks to Lin Li's three ice walls, Hutton and Stephen won precious time to cast the spells. Immediately, there were sounds of abstruse and mysterious recitation. The raging magical elements were like tidewater that accumulated at their sides. The 1,000 miles of ice and winterhorn were unleashed very quickly. At that instant, the surroundings were like a snowy scene. The ground froze within a diameter of 100 meters. The blazing fires were extinguished immediately, and there were huge snowflakes falling from the sky. While the icy ground was firmed up, it trapped the few Aztecs that were closest to the ice walls. The 1,000 miles of ice was the most powerful spell among the others below level 20. Its effects were amplified with the support from the winterhorn. It was beyond imagination. Although the Aztecs had flame shields on their bodies, they were unable to respond to it quickly. After the 1,000 miles of ice succeeded, Hutton and Stephen grew more unreasonable. They continuously cast frost spears onto the Aztecs that were trapped by the ice. If it was before, such a level 12 spell would never be able to harm Aztecs that were above level -18. To them, the flame shield would only turn the frost spears into itches on their body. Unfortunately, the goal of these frost spears was not to kill these Aztecs, but to trap the Aztecs in the firm ice. Although they were only level 12 spells, Hutton and Stephen were casting them instantaneously. They aimed dozens of frost spears on the Aztecs in every single strike. No matter how firmed up the ice was, there would always be the moment it would crack. Crunch, that was a gentle sound in that intensive battle. However, what followed was terrifying results. As the first crack appeared in the ice that trapped an Aztec, more appeared. These cracks deepened like drain tunnels. Pum! The moment the firm ice shattered, the frozen Aztec burst into pieces. Red pieces of flesh stuck within the ice looked rather striking in the midst of a snowy area. However, after one of their kind died, the other Aztecs used pyroblast to shatter the ice walls. Hutton and Stephen had to stop the recitation of the 1,000 miles of ice and utilize different types of magic spells to control the scene. Among the many spells, there were the Earthbind spell, Bloodbind spell, and the Thorny Entanglement. The battle became fierce and entered a stalemate. There was constant spell casting to control the situation. Hutton and Stephen were so engrossed that they did not realize that the youngest mage had not been doing anything after he established the three ice walls. Instead, he cast the levitation spell and hovered 10 meters up the sky. He looked as though he was waiting for something. Lin Li was indeed waiting. He was waiting for Hutton and Stephen to provoke these Aztecs further so that they would transform into live bombs. The effect of the Maze Mage array would be maximized the moment they turned into live bombs. It did not require all of the Aztecs to transform, though. As long as one or two did so, it would be sufficient for Lin Li to kill them in the gigantic pit. In reality, Lin Li did not wait too long. The opportunity came 3 minutes after the death of the first Aztec. The inability to break away from the magic control of the humans finally agitated the biggest Aztec. Its loud growl made the other Aztecs seem as though they were high on drugs. They started to cast the fire spells that were innate to them. Flaming Storm, Hellfire, Fire Rain, Pyroblast. At that instant, the entire forest turned into a flaming world. The strength in numbers created a great destruction. The ground that was still frozen started to burn. Dragons of fire growled amidst the pouring fire rain. The flames created a 6-pointed star array that seemed to have a crimson glow. At a glance, it seemed like the entire world was on fire. The magic attack that was close to madness made Hutton and Steven incredibly exhausted. They had no choice. The attack was too intense. The Earthbind spell, Ice Wall spell, and Bloodbind spell lost their effects in that battle. They did not have the time to expand the spells before being engulfed by the flames of the fire rain. "Steven, this doesn't work," Hutton said in a low voice as he cast another wall of ice. There was a distinct worry on his pale and exhausted face. "You should say that to Felix instead," Steven enforced the ice wall with great difficulty. There were beads of sweat on his forehead. While he said that, he took a glance back at Lin Li, who was in the air. There was a disdainful tone in his voice. "That coward created all this mess himself, but he is now hiding up there with the levitation spell like a tortoise. Humph, I am interested to see how he is going to deal with these Aztecs alone when we use up our mana. Maybe President Felix is still trying to figure things out." Frankly speaking, Hutton was guilty when he replied. Although Steven was irritating, he was not talking nonsense this time. President Felix did not do anything after he used the Frost Dragon gun. Instead, he was levitating in the air, quietly. Could it be that he is really planning an escape? This is the abyss of Tharlan. Even if he wants to leave, where could he go? Figure things out? Cut the crap. If he had a way, he would get rid of these Aztecs. Does he need to hide so far away like a coward? Hutton opened his mouth to defend Lin Li, but could not find any words. He could only take a long sigh and put his focus back to the battle at hand. A minute passed. 2 minutes passed. 3 minutes. 4 minutes. The battle was going on for close to 5 minutes. After another ice wall was broken by the pyroblast, the ice shards darted like angry bullets. This time, however, the Aztec that smashed the ice wall stopped its magic attacks. It rolled up its red body. Immediately, the tidal-like fire elements around the Aztecs bubbled vigorously like boiling water. "It's here." Lin Li prepared himself the moment the Aztec rolled itself up. Lin Li moved to the top of the ice wall like a black streak of lightning. What followed was a ZUK, as a frost dragon gun that had been prepared long ago bolted out. Boom! That was an earth-shaking sound. The unlucky Aztec got shot by the frost dragon gun the moment it turned into a live bomb. The vigorous fire elements within its body had nowhere to go, so it exploded on the spot. The effects of a live bomb could be described as terrifying. The explosion of this Aztec shattered down the 7 ice walls immediately. The 7 ice walls were painstakingly established by Hutton and Steven, who spent most of their mana on them. In the earlier battle, it required at least 10 pyroblasts to break one wall. Now, however, one live bomb was enough to knock down 7 of them. The mages turned pallid. **T. The effects of the explosion were not what archmages of level 19 could handle. As long as they had not reached the legendary realm, no mage could survive such a horrific explosion without a magical domain. The 7 walls of ice were supposed to delay the Aztecs for a while. They did not expect them to shatter instantaneously with such a terrifying explosion. Now that a great portion of their mana had been drained, and that the only thing they could rely on had been turned to smithereens, were they going to use their magic staff to fight the Aztecs physically? What now? Hutton and Steven looked at each other anxiously after the thunderous explosion. The group of Aztecs was in shock as well. Although their intelligence was not any higher as compared to the normal magical beasts, they were clear on the present situation. One of their kind used a live bomb, but did not kill anything. Instead, it only knocked down a few walls of ice. Very quickly, the biggest Aztec let out a ferocious growl. As compared to its previous growl, it was clearly filled with fury and madness. 3 humans had made them lose 3 of their kind. For the leader of the Aztecs, it was beyond tolerance. It had decided to eliminate the 3 humans regardless of what it would take. Immediately after the growl, 5 out of 10 Aztecs curled up their wings. Then, fire elements in the entire abyss of Tharlan vibrated vigorously. Both Hutton and Steven could very clearly feel the energy of the balled-up Aztecs increasing exponentially. It rose from level 18 to level 19, then from level 19 to close to the legendary realm. Damn. The anxiousness in their eyes turned into hopelessness. The explosion from the 5 Aztecs that were dangerously close to the legendary realm was a terrifying thing that Hutton could not bring himself to even imagine. That was a force that could lead to the end of the world, not to mention if the force were to hit him. The aftermath of the explosion would suffice to turn him into broken bones. Just when he was in despair, there was a gust of wind that approached him. Hutton turned to see President Felix land by his side slowly. "Mage Felix, what are you doing?" Hutton froze. He could not fathom the thought processes in the dude's mind. He could have left the battleground with his levitation spell any time. Why would he want to approach at such a critical moment? "Don't ask so much," Lin Li interrupted Hutton with a wave as his hand. He wasn't interested in what Hutton was thinking about. "Can you use that magical equipment for another time?" Lin Li asked, with a hurried voice. "Sure. That's great," Lin Li replied as he let out some of his mana. The mana was entering the source of the ManhwaRecap array. As this wave of mana entered, the dull-colored source of mana lit up. There was a dazzling glow of light, and the mana within the level 10 magical crystal flowed through the ManhwaRecap array at once. Each magic node lit up as the mana flowed through it. As each magic circuit was activated, the true force of the high-level ManhwaRecap array finally got unleashed. Then, Hutton's and Stephen's expression froze. They suddenly saw that the several Aztecs that were dangerously close to the legendary realm suddenly turned against one another. They were eyeing their own kind with a glare that was filled with craze and despair. "What the f*** are they doing?" Hutton gaped. It was like a dream. One of the Aztecs pounced towards its own kind. No, no, no. Not only one. That instant, all of the Aztecs started to battle each other. 2 of the Aztecs even forgot the rank between demons and pounced on that biggest Aztec. Could this be the work of President Felix? The thought of that possibility created cold sweat on Hutton's forehead. That force is too scary. The ability to let his enemies turn against themselves made him more demon than demons. "What are you waiting for? Quick, use your magical equipment now." "Oh." Lin Li's voice ascertained Hutton's suspicion. However, Hutton did not dare to ask more. Sometimes, it wouldn't be good to know too many secrets. His curiosity about President Felix's secrets might make him a suspicious person. It would be good to maintain their present relationship. It had improved greatly as compared to before. Although they were not close, Hutton had the confidence that he would be able to let the Manhwa family form an alliance with this powerful man. With that in mind, Hutton transferred some mana into his bangle. It called up the blue shield, which covered the 3 men securely. Immediately after the earth-trembling sound, the mountains and ground started to tremble. A mushroom cloud that created infinite heat waves shot up to the sky. Hutton could feel the warmth through the blue shield. The aftermath of the explosion lingered for a while. When the 3 men opened their eyes again, the forest had already been changed beyond recognition. There wasn't one intact leaf within 100 meters. Even the ground beneath their feet appeared as though it had its top layer ripped off. The soil and ashes that flew in the air, that was mixed with the thick and heavy smoke, seemed like gray clouds. "That's too scary," Hutton muttered in a shaky voice. The fear on his face was not one that could be concealed. If he did not have the protection from the family's bangle, a tiny bit of repercussion from the explosion was sufficient to turn him into smashed bones. Even though the bangle was a hand-me-down, Hutton could not help but smile bitterly as he glanced at his right wrist, where was the bangle that had been passed down for 4 generations. The crescent bangle was supposed to defend the wearer against critical blows on the legendary level, yet it was damaged by that one explosion. What a pity, Hutton slowly removed his bangle. However, his expression did not match his words. As the first heir of the Manhwa family, he knew something better than common mages: life was everything. Any powerful magical equipment would be an idle talk if lives had been lost. "It is really a pity," Lin Li agreed. He knew very clearly how the massive explosion earlier on was made up of 5 Aztecs that were above level 18. It was a force that could destroy everything. The combined force of the Lich at the Scar of Death and the humorous Wyrm would not have been able to rival it. Although Hutton's bangle only protected them from the aftermath of the explosion, it was already considered good magical equipment. "As long as we're alive, we can always create more magical equipment," replied Hutton. There was a hint of sadness underlying his smile. "Why not?" said Lin Li after a moment of hesitation. "Pass me the bangle for the time being, and I'll think of a way to fix it when I'm back at the Tower of Dusk." "Really?" asked Hutton in surprise. If it had been before, Hutton would not have believed his ears. The crescent bangle had been passed down for 4 generations, and was definitely one of the Manhwa family's top 5 magical equipment. Unless absolutely necessary, the bangle would always be locked in the family's treasury for safekeeping. Once such magical equipment got damaged, it would be nearly impossible to fix it. Not to mention the young mage of the age 20 before them, even if it were the renowned Gilded Rose that monopolized the Alchemy 1 industry, it would not have the ability to repair the damaged bangle. However, Hutton did not dare to doubt Lin Li now. He had witnessed the extraordinary talents of President Felix ever since he met him in the Blackstone Mountains. Sometimes, Hutton suspected that there should be nothing in this world that could challenge this man. If he said that the crescent bangle had a chance to be fixed, Hutton's hope shot up from 0. He could not help but believe in that slight possibility. "I can try, but you can't blame me if it fails, alright?" Lin Li replied with a humble smile. To be honest, it would not be difficult for Lin Li to repair such a bangle. He was a man who would be able to reproduce all the legendary magical equipment of Anril if he needed to. His offer to repair the bangle for Hutton was merely out of gratitude for his efforts in defending from that explosion. The maze ManhwaRecap could ensure the Aztecs turned against one another, but it would not ensure Lin Li's safety. It was in his plans to use the elemental shield to protect himself while he distorted his mental strength to escape from the exploding forest at top speed when the Aztecs started to fight their own kind. However, Lin Li knew that he would never escape unharmed. After all, the impact created from the explosion of several Aztecs that were above level 18 would be terrifying. If he had not reached the legendary realm, he would not have the ability to resist such a force. Hutton's crescent bangle saved them. The blue projection let Lin Li amend his plans immediately. The process was smooth sailing as well. It not only eliminated the 10 Aztecs, but also ensured that he remained unharmed within the sphere of protection. Apart from the maze ManhwaRecap, Hutton's crescent bangle played a significant role. He would return him that favor if he could repair the bangle for him. Hutton was not aware of Lin Li's thoughts. He only knew that since President Felix said it himself, it meant that the crescent bangle could really be repaired. "Could a person like you be able to repair the crescent bangle?" That was Stephen, who interrupted before Hutton could express his gratitude to Lin Li. His words were as straightforward as expected. "Don't think that I don't know what's on your mind. You must be planning on stealing the crescent bangle from Hutton. Although the crescent bangle is damaged now, the mana left in it is sufficient to make it good magical equipment that can defend against level 11 spells. These types of magical equipment would be worth 1,000,000 gold coins. How is it, Mage Felix? Am I right? Is it worth that much money?" Lin Li muttered as he rubbed his nose, and stopped paying attention to Stephen. Lin Li knew that the more attention he gave to people like Stephen, the stronger they would be yapping away at him. The best way was not to give him any attention, unless he meant to smack Stephen to death with a rod to prevent future trouble. After all, Lin Li was really busy now. Although the Aztecs had been killed by the explosion, their corpses were still in the forest. Those were valuable treasures to Lin Li. The body of an Aztec contained extremely powerful fire elements. Its red wings were especially good ingredients for magic armors. Once such a magic armor had been created, it could be used to firm up a flame shield. Then, its magic defense would be as strong as an archmage's. The horns on the head of the Aztec could be used to enable weapons to have the ability to damage any type of magical weapon and magic shields. That would be injurious to enemies that were close to level 20. It was rare to see Aztecs that were above level 18. Even if he were to see them on normal days, he might not have the chance to get their corpses. Now that 10 dead Aztecs were in front of him, how could Lin Li miss such a valuable opportunity? Lin Li busied himself with the collection of the Aztecs' wings and horns, and paid no attention to Stephen. Unfortunately, Lin Li did not expect Stephen to be so absurd today. Although he did not show his interests in Stephen, that dude did not have the intention to let him off. Stop there. That was Stephen when Lin Li was walking around to find the bodies of the Aztecs. Stop feigning ignorance. Mage Felix, isn't it time to tell us the truth? What is your motive in luring us into this forest? Stephen, Hutton called Stephen uneasily. Stephen's words were not to be trivialized. He was outright accusing Felix of plotting against everyone. If he wasn't careful, he could damage his relationship with Felix, and when they started to turn against each other and be injured in the process, it would be even harder for the three of them to locate the palace Tutankhamun was talking about. Hutton, I'm not trying to lecture you, but you should have your limits as a nice person. Didn't you see that fella hiding above after he lured us into the forest? If not for our good luck and the group of Aztecs turn against one another, we would have been killed in that explosion, Stephen said as he fixed his deadly glare onto Lin Li. It was filled with anger and injustice. Also, the competition for Jaresco's relics was supposed to be between me and Hutton, who are the real descendants of Jaresco's disciples. What are you to compete with us? Stephen, this is Tutankhamun's idea. Hutton replied anxiously after seeing Stephen getting out of hand. He could not help but speak with a higher pitch. Unfortunately, Stephen did not pay attention to Hutton. His glare did not move away from Lin Li. Don't be so cocky, just because you have the support of the Supreme Council. I'm not bragging, but let me tell you that the Supreme Council is really nothing in the breezy plains. Offending us Dark Blade only mean death. Do you know that the Darkness Shrine is behind the Dark Blade? Do you think that the Supreme Council would want to offend the Darkness Shrine just because of you? Quit being naive. Why don't you be more tactful and leave this competition? Or else, you would not be the only one going to regret all this. Your so-called Guild of Magic would be implicated and buried with you when the time comes. Have you finished talking? Lin Li asked, smilingly. He had been listening to Stephen silently as the latter had nagged. Only when Stephen took a pause did he ask that question. What? Stephen said as he recalled the experience he had in the wooden house. The sight of that smile caused him to lose all of his words. He took a step back subconsciously. I've finished my piece. What do you want? Stephen added on unnaturally. Shut up when you are done. Even if I have the mood to listen to your nagging, that greater demon might not have this patience. Greater demon? Stephen's heart tightened. Only after looking left and right for quite a while did he guiltily reply, what greater demon are you talking about? Don't think that I will be scared when you weave that story. I haven't settled that score earlier on with you. You can settle the score when you engrave the plate for your grave. Lin Li did not look once at Stephen when he spoke. Right after speaking, he cast a levitation spell and swerved into the sky at top speed. Let's talk after we leave this place. Hutton looked at that blurred view of Lin Li's back and started to recite the spell for levitation. You really believe there would be a greater demon in such a place? Stephen looked at Hutton in shock. He suddenly felt that the mage that had the same status with him had become very foreign to him. Hutton had not been like this before. He used to be a man who did everything with confidence and mastery, and always carried a confident disposition. Stephen's father had once told him during their first meeting that Hutton would be his strongest competitor in the breezy plains in the future. However, the present Hutton was void of his past character. Now, Hutton had become an extremely agreeable man before that Felix. How could Hutton stay by Felix so religiously when the latter wanted to make use of a group of Aztecs to get rid of himself and Hutton? Actually, Stephen, Hutton, who was about to fly into the air, turned back. He stared at Stephen for about a minute. I feel that you should believe what Mage Felix said. At least, there is no need for Mage Felix to turn against us before we find the palace. That being said, if Mage Felix had the intention to do that, we would not be able to find that palace. In this world, there are always a few people that are beyond your comprehension. After he finished his line, Hutton swooped into the sky. In reality, the speech he gave to Stephen was actually more for himself. Hutton could not verbalize the feelings he got from the battle. This was the first time Hutton saw Lin Li participate in a battle. This was also the first time Hutton felt that there would always be some monsters in this world that he could not understand. Before this, no matter how miserable the Sire bandits were when described by Adalo, Hutton was firm in his belief that he would be able to achieve the same results if he were to put in more effort. However, when Hutton witnessed the Aztecs fall under the hands of President like a dozen marionettes, he changed his perspective. The dozen Aztecs that were above level 18 were completely wiped out in 10 minutes. It was then that Hutton realized that no matter how hard he worked, even if he were to toil his entire life, it would be always impossible to bridge the gap between himself and the young president. This gap was not only about magic powers. It was about confidence. Hutton felt that the young president was invincible and too impeccable. President Felix had carefully considered every move from the start to the end of the battle. He executed all plans perfectly. The dozen Aztecs turned into mere puppets in the hands of President Felix, manipulated according to his will. Hutton remembered that when he reached the Archmage realm, Mentor Cheyenne once told him that it was not magic that made mages powerful. It was the mind. Hutton was not yet capable of understanding these words then, but everything was clear now. One would never be able to defeat a mage who could control a situation perfectly. Although the young president had not reached the realm Mentor Cheyenne was speaking of, Hutton knew it wouldn't be long before that happened. It was a fact that one's magic powers could be enhanced, and magic realms could be surpassed. However, talents would not be imitable. The thought of the battle earlier assured Hutton of one thing: even if he had the ability to let the Aztecs turn against each other, and if he had the powers of President Felix, he would never be able to achieve such perfect results. "Hope Stephen can be clever," Hutton muttered. He could not help but grin. Hutton knew that Stephen would never understand the terrifying side of President Felix. This was the difference between the Manhwa family and the Dark Blade. The former knew the importance of relationships. If one could not defeat an enemy, he would try to become friends with that opponent. Contrarily, if the latter could not win against an opponent the legal way, he would devise another way to defeat his enemy. Of course, Hutton did not think Stephen would ever understand that. The reason for his reminder was to prevent himself from being implicated by Stephen's foolishness. Hutton would not be interested to know whether Stephen was really silly. "Beyond my comprehension? I would like to see if there's such a powerful person in the world," Stephen muttered coldly as he watched Hutton leave. He took out his right hand from his pocket slowly and cast a levitation spell. Despite distorting his mental strength unnaturally, and increasing the speed of his levitation spell, Lin Li needed more than 1 hour to reach the edge of the vast forest. After making sure that the frightening existence had vanished, Lin Li slowed down his flying speed and waited for Hutton to catch up with him. His words were not to scare Stephen. Lin Li was at least 80% certain that there really was a greater demon of at least level 21 in the forest. Although Lin Li did not really explore the abyss of Tharlan when he was in the Endless World, he did enough research. One piece of information was related to the spirit walkers. It was said that the shape of a spirit walker was like a puff of cloud. Apart from its heart, the body of a spirit walker was an illusion created by its magnificent mental strength. Spirit walkers were born with the mental strength of magic shooters, and could use different types of mental spells. Their ability in spiritual force was more powerful than that of a priest above level 15. If the Aztecs were the demons beneath the abyss, the spirit walkers would be the royals of the demons. No other demon apart from the spirit walker in the 99 levels of abyss would have the ability of level 15 right from birth. This strength was comparable to the high elves. However, the spirit walker had a critical weakness. It would be very difficult for them to surpass level 20. Lin Li had not heard of any spirit walker that was above level 20 anywhere in the whole of Endless World. No. He had heard of one. This spirit walker was mentioned in the library of Bright Moon City. When Lin Li was researching about the abyss of Tharlan, he stayed in the library for a couple of days. It was where he came across an encyclopedia of the abyssal demons. This book had records about a spirit walker by the name of Mephistos. It was once the lord of the abyss of Tharlan, at least of level 21. Unfortunately, no one knew what happened to the legendary spirit walker. It was as though it had vanished from the abyss of Tharlan. The author of the encyclopedia even predicted that one of the reasons had to be related to Azardas. That dragon of destruction descended upon the abyss of Tharlan and killed the former lord. However, while there would be a chance for them to defeat him, it wouldn't be possible to kill him. Lin Li was 100% sure that that frightening spiritual force had to come from a spirit walker. There were only legendary realm spirit walkers in the whole of the abyss of Tharlan. Only they had the ability to emit such a daunting force. What if the legendary level spirit walker was the true Mephistos himself? That was not a joke. Although Lin Li had the ability to challenge a normal person from the legendary realm, it would be incredibly dangerous if he were to meet the Mephistos. Mephistos was a terrifying existence. As the former lord of Tharlan, even if he were not as powerful as the shadow of the dragon of destruction, he was not someone he could trifle with. Mage Velik, may I ask you a question? Hutton asked as he caught up with Lin Li when he was plotting his moves quietly. What question? Lin Li replied. His impression of the heir of the Manhwa family had changed for the better after the earlier battle. Although it was not sufficient to let him forget the clashes they had before, Hutton was a man he could hold conversation with. After all, unlike Stephen, Hutton was a clever man. Is there really a greater demon in that forest? Yes, Lin Li looked at Hutton for a long time before nodding his head gravely. A greater demon that is beyond your imagination. We need to leave this place as soon as possible. That was Lin Li, with his first nervous expression so far. Mephistos was a really terrifying being. It had lifespan longer than any other high elves, and ruled the whole of Tharlan for many years. No one knew how much power Mephistos had acquired over those countless years. Furthermore, Mephistos was well equipped with the spiritual force, and the scariest thing about the spiritual force was slavery. If the three men were to be defeated by Mephistos, their souls would become Mephistos' slaves eternally. It was a consequence more frightening than death. Oh yes, spiritual force. Lin Li suddenly remembered something. Hutton, go and see if Stephen has come yet. We are pressed for time and only can wait 2-3 minutes. If not, we can only go and find the palace ourselves. Alright, let me check on him. Hutton nodded as he made a reverse trip with the levitation spell. Lin Li only opened his ring of endless storm when he saw Hutton disappear into the distance. Get out, Canoris, F*CKU. That was Canoris when he dashed out of the ring of endless storm impatiently. You are too much. How could you lie to the great soul trader another time? Do you know what credibility is? Do you know what respect is? How could you seal such an almighty soul trader in this darn dimension? You are going to get retribution. Lin Li was unaffected by Canoris's raging growls. He rubbed his nose and smiled innocently. Let me tell you. From now on, don't think that you can receive any benefits from my side. Canoris nagged on. However, his tone changed very quickly. God damn it, why are you in the abyss of Tharlan? Are you trying to seek death? You came here before? Cut the crap. Quick, leave this darn place immediately. The Darkness Lord in the abyss of Tharlan is a shadow of the dragon of destruction. His strength would be beyond your imagination. Your pathetic powers would dig a grave for yourself. Canoris's voice was filled with terror. *T. I'm really going to die because of you. Can you not implicate me if you are seeking death? I don't know where you get your courage to enter the abyss of Tharlan. Do you know that the level 21 spirit walker, Mephistos, did not even have a chance to counter any attack made by the Lord of Darkness? Now that you are not even in the legendary level, how could you enter such a dangerous place? Mephistos? That's right, it is Mephistos. He is the first spirit walker in the legendary realm in these countless years. Before the shadow of the dragon of destruction defeated him, he was the ruler of the abyss of Tharlan, and was known as the Lord of Souls. Unfortunately, As the shadow of the Dragon of Destruction descended, Mephisto's rule came to an end. The Lord of Darkness defeated him with ease and sliced his soul into countless pieces, which he sealed in all corners of the abyss of Tharlan separately. The shadow of the Dragon of Destruction once said that unless the force of dark force and evilness stopped shadowing the abyss of Tharlan, Mephisto's would always be sealed there, all until the fall of the endless abyss. That's great. Oh, almighty soul traitor, let me tell you some good news. What news? I've met Mephisto's. Holy, why is that good news? Knorris spat as he spoke. Wait, what did you say? You met Mephisto's? He asked anxiously to confirm his hearing worked properly. Yeah. Lin Li nodded his head and told Knorris about his experience in the forest. That's right. That's really Mephisto's strength, Knorris muttered blankly as he hovered in the air. The Lord of Darkness once said that unless darkness and evilness stop shadowing the abyss of Tharlan, Mephisto's would always be sealed here. Furthermore, with the influence the Lord of Darkness has, how could the seal be faulty? Unless, he said as though he had been possessed. Unless what? Unless the Lord of Darkness has fallen? Let me think, Knorris' words jolted Lin Li's memory. He remembered how Tutankhamun had told him that the powers of the Lord of Darkness had been dwindling. Even the abyss of Tharlan had lost the influence it had had in the past. Lin Li did not take Tutankhamun's words to heart when he'd said that. To Lin Li, regardless of how weak the Lord of Darkness was, it was at least above the legendary realm. With the laws of darkness and evilness, it was not what Lin Li could deal with. Now that Lin Li heard what Knorris had to say, he could not help but feel excited. The situation would differ greatly depending on whether the strength of the Lord of Darkness dwindled or completely fell. If it was just the deterioration of power, Lin Li could only resort to sneaking into the Palace of Darkness and leave the place via the teleportation portal discreetly. However, if the Lord of Darkness had fallen completely, it would be a totally different matter. Lin Li could very well be like a bandit. He could swagger his way through the palace towards the throne and claim all the treasures in the palace. After all, that was the Palace of Darkness. The Endless Abyss had 99 levels, where each of the levels was an independent world governed by one demon lord. However, these 99 worlds followed the same law, survival of the fittest. It was a world that followed a strict hierarchy. The nether spawns were at the bottom of the food chain, followed by minion demons, greater demons, and demon lord. The demon lord at the peak of the food chain had the exclusive privilege to enjoy all resources. That was more thorough than the aristocratic system of human beings. After all, there was only one demon lord in each level of the Endless Abyss. It was not obliged to share with anyone else. The abyss of Tharlan seemed to be filled with black flame, which made it appear rather deserted. However, that did not mean that the abyss of Tharlan was an impoverished place. On the contrary, it had been said that Tharlan was a rich and prosperous land. Compared to the breezy plains, it had numerous valuable mineral veins and countless types of rare herbs. Many mineral veins and herbs were unique to the abyss of Tharlan. It would be impossible to find them in any other part of Amril. The variety of these herbs and mineral veins was vast. Lin Li knew 2 types of mineral veins and 3 kinds of herbs that grew in it. The 2 mineral veins were perfect forging materials that had the ability to help produce powerful weapons. The 3 kinds of herbs had even more importance. Each of them was a necessary ingredient of 3 respective different types of guru-level potions. Lin Li was very certain that he would be able to find loads of magical crystal in the palace of the Lord of Darkness. The Endless Abyss was a place where massacres and battles were commonplace. Every lord from each level of the abyss had ambition to conquer the other levels, which made the entire abyss of Tharlan a huge battlefield. There would always be fights and battles happening every second, resulting in a vast number of deaths every day. As years passed, the number of deaths had become astronomical. Even if just 1,000th or 1,000,000th of the demon's magical crystals had been left behind, it would definitely be a terrifying number. The Lord of Darkness was the only creature in the abyss of Tharlan that had the right to assign these magical crystals. There would definitely be a surprising number of magical crystals in his palace, and their level would certainly amaze any mage. Since the Lord of Darkness was a powerful existence, how would he be interested in magical crystals of only level 15? These were not Lin Li's wild assumptions. There was a bandit in the endless world who got his hands on the map of the 6th level of the Abyss of Suffering. With that treasure of a map, he entered the palace of the Abyss of Suffering miraculously and gained a huge fortune. This bandit left a deep impression on Lin Li. After that, he participated in an auction with his fortunes, and became Lin Li's only competitor there. Although Lin Li won the auction, the victory was not easy. If the bandit had a little more gold coins than him, Lin Li would have to lose his pants. The bandit was able to use the fortunes he earned from the Abyss of Suffering to get most of the things he wanted. Now imagine. If Lin Li were to sweep the Abyss of Tharlan empty, how invincible would he be? Before that could happen, however, he'd have to first think of a way to deal with Mephistos. Lin Li became clearer on the situation after he heard Canoris's words. The Abyss of Tharlan had to have undergone an undesirable challenge that year. Otherwise, it would be impossible for the shadow of the Dragon of Destruction to fall. As for what difficulty it entailed, Lin Li had totally no idea. He only knew that the seal restraining Mephistos had lost its effect with the fall. After many years, Mephistos had finally found its soul fragments. Mephistos was the former lord of Tharlan. It found its soul fragments after countless number of years. It was a coincidence for its enemy to have fallen. A fool would have been able to guess what Mephistos would want to do next. Lin Li would bet his life that Mephistos would want to return to the Palace of Darkness and reclaim the position he had lost. Canoris had brought a good and a bad piece of news to Lin Li. The good news was that the shadow of the Dragon of Destruction had fallen. The bad news was the existence of Mephistos. This legendary-level spirit walker had always been eager to return to the Palace of Darkness. Lin Li could even imagine the situation after Mephistos regained its throne. If it were to happen, he would not have a chance to go near the throne, let alone sweep the palace clean. Mephistos would definitely deploy a continuous stream of demon troops if it were to sense anything amiss. How dangerous could even a dozen Aztecs be? Yet as long as Mephistos wished to, it could summon millions of Aztecs to drown them if their sea of live bombs. Canoris, help me think of a way. I have to find the Palace of Darkness. Why should I help you? That's because I've decided to release you from the Ring of Endless Storm after we return and try to create a new body for you. That was what you said previously. Oh, is that so? Lin Li replied the lashings without a sense of guilt. Then, this ascertains my sincerity. Look, I've made the same promise twice. Where would you find a person sincerer than me? It was fortunate that Canoris did not have a heart. Otherwise, his rage would have given him a heart attack. How is it, almighty soul traitor? Do you want to consider the deal? I'm not always this sincere. Humph, you have not even reached the legendary realm. How would you be able to create a new body for me? I say, Canoris. How could a soul traitor ask such a dumb question? Couldn't you tell that I'm only a step away from the legendary realm? I could take that step anytime. What if I reach that realm after I find the Palace of Darkness? Canoris, do you not want a new body soon? This, Lin Li's words made Canoris hesitate. It was as Lin Li had said. As a soul traitor, how would Canoris not be aware of Lin Li being dangerously close to the legendary realm? Canoris even knew that the Palace of Darkness would be the young mage's last step to reach the realm. That was because Canoris was aware of the secret hidden within the Palace of Darkness. However, Canoris was still very hesitant. He felt that the young mage was still too weak to challenge a terrifying existence like Mephistos. If it were before, it would not be a concern for Canoris. However, things became different after Mephistos' seal broke. Mephistos had been released from the seal and had found its soul fragments. It would only make sense for it to want to return to the Palace of Darkness. His return would renew its rights as the ruler of the Abyss of Tharlan, and it had become the real Lord of Souls. It would be more dangerous than treading on a tightrope if the young mage were to enter the Palace of Darkness at such timing. It would only mean death if Lin Li were to meet Mephistos. If that were to happen, Canoris knew he would be implicated as well. Aren't you aware that we might bump into Mephistos? I have an idea. PFFF, you have an idea? What idea can you have? That is Mephistos, the Lord of Souls that had surpassed level 21 a million years ago. Can't you believe in me for once? Didn't you sense a strange divine power in the dimensional space recently? Divine power? Yeah, Lin Li nodded his head grinningly. Lin Li was not boasting. He was aware that he would not have a chance if he were to meet Kanoris with his current powers. However, they knew there was still a piece of the debris of stars in his ring of endless storm. Although the holy light would not be able to slaughter Mephistos directly, it would definitely help to buy time for him. I hope that you really have an idea, then, Kanoris said reluctantly. He finally agreed to help after a period of hesitation. Congrats, you've made a very good decision, Lin Li replied with a smile of satisfaction. Alright. Cut the crap, Kanoris said impatiently. The Palace of Darkness is deep inside the abyss of Tharlan. This is not really a secret, though. But, I presume few people knew where the depths of the abyss of Tharlan is located. You have to know it. That's right, I do. Afterward, Kanoris told Lin Li everything. Although Lin Li knew that Kanoris had a very mysterious background and a lot of hidden secrets, it was only today that Lin Li realized how surprising were the secrets Kanoris knew. Kanoris was not only aware of the exact location of the Palace of Darkness, but also the way to enter the place. He had a clear and distinct memory of each and every alley and secret chamber inside the Palace of Darkness. As he listened to Kanoris, Lin Li could not help but suspect Kanoris to be like himself. Did he also have the intention to loot the palace clean in the past? It seems that I have to find time to talk to this soul trader properly soon. Lin Li was utterly amazed by the information Kanoris knew. It was as though there was nothing in the abyss of Tharlan Kanoris was unaware of. No. Not just the abyss of Tharlan. Lin Li remembered how Kanoris told him about the origins of the Lord of Nightmares not long ago. This fella, who claims to be a soul trader, does not seem like a simple man. Just when Lin Li was having those suspicions, he saw Hutton flying back. Why, you can't find Steven? Lin Li asked Hutton, who had flown back alone. Yeah, I searched all likely places, but could not find him at all, Hutton replied as he shook his head worriedly. Of course, Hutton was definitely not worried for Steven's safety. Not to mention the enmity the Malfa family had with the Dark Blade, the fact that he had to compete with Steven for Juresco's inheritance was enough to let Hutton ignore his safety. Hutton feared that the two of them might not be able to find the Palace of Darkness without Steven. Although Steven was not an affable man, he was still an archmage. He would be of great help at critical moments. Forget it, it can't be helped. Why don't we treasure the time we have and leave his horrendous place as soon as possible? I don't know when that greater demon might come out. Alright, the two young mages cast the levitation spell and flew towards the edge of the forest. Lin Li kept communicating with Kanoris with his mental strength. Even Hutton, who was physically close to Lin Li, did not realize him conversing with the hammer on his back as they flew. Did you see that river in front? You would see a waterfall if you travel 2 to 3 kilometers along that river. The Palace of Darkness is located below that waterfall. The water is very strange, Lin Li said as he glanced at the torrential river from the top. It was crimson, and seemed as glaring as fresh blood. Do not belittle that river. It was named the Water of Death for a reason. Every droplet of that river carries lethal toxicity. A droplet would suffice to claim the life of any demon with a strong life force. Didn't you say the Palace of Darkness is hidden below the waterfall? How will we be able to? How to enter, right? Heh, you wouldn't be able to enter that waterfall if not for the guidance of the almighty Soul Trader. You don't need to worry about it now. As long as you follow my instructions, I can assure that you will enter the Palace of Darkness with ease. Alright. Lin Li nodded, and did not probe further. Kanoris was the only one Lin Li knew he could rely on in the entire Tharlan. Since the fate of this soul trader had been tied with himself, Kanoris would not dare to create any chances for mishaps. If anything undesirable were to happen to Lin Li, the best outcome for Kanoris would be external entrapment in the Ring of Endless Storm. Now that Kanoris had the confidence that they could find the palace, Lin Li could only give him his trust. The two young mages flew along the water of death. 2 or 3 hours had passed, but not only did they not see the waterfall Kanoris mentioned, they also did not see Stephen catching up with them. Could it be that this unagreeable man had been slain by Mephistos? As the abyss of Tharlan had no day and night, the sky above was a constant dull gray. While the black flames could be seen everywhere, they did not provide any warmth in the world filled with haze and cold. Staying here for a long period of time made one feel as though their body was rotting away. Lin Li could barely remember how long he had been flying along the water of death. The only thing he knew was that the sky above him was always a dull gray, and the water beneath his feet was a dark red. As the world seemed to only consist of 2 colors, the whole journey was dry and boring. If he had to think of anything that added a little something to their journey, it would be the fact that Hutton's mana would be depleted every once in a while, and the two of them would have no choice but to take a rest by the water of death. The low-ranking demons that would appear then were the only excitement in their boring journey. Hutton had to take a rest 14 times throughout the whole journey. The 14th time he took a rest, Lin Li finally noticed that the river started flowing faster. I finally made it to the end. Lin Li could hardly wait to fly into the sky after Hutton regained his mana. Indeed, Lin Li noticed that the water of death ceased to flow after they flew another 2,000 or so meters. A massive waterfall appeared before Lin Li's eyes as water fell with a deafening noise from the top of the waterfall. There was no end to the waterfall that they could see, just as if it was a never-ending abyss. The Palace of Darkness is down there. After getting Hutton's attention, Lin Li plunged into water and dived down while closely following the edge of the waterfall. The scenery whizzed past them on both sides like a movie on fast forward. Lin Li dived for a good half an hour before he finally saw a huge lake. He cast a levitation spell and slowed down the speed at which he was diving before coming to a stop and lightly landing at the edge of the lake. After waiting for Hutton to land, the two of them circled the lake. "This place is little strange," Lin Li said as he brushed his chin with a face filled with doubt. This place was strange indeed, as they could not hear the sound of water even though there was clearly a waterfall coming down from the sky. There was not even a ripple in sight. It was as if the waterfall did not end at the lake, but went through an invisible door to another world instead. "Mage Felix, look here!" Hutton exclaimed and pointed at the middle of the lake just as Lin Li was deep in thought. "What?" Lin Li paused before he looked at where Hutton was pointing at. Then Lin Li's eyes became big. There was a reflection in the middle of the lake. What's going on? In his surprise, Lin Li did not even bother to think about whether the lake might be poisonous before he flew over to the center of the lake with a levitation spell. Then, he inhaled sharply. The reflection in the center of the lake was clearly that of a towering palace. It was mysterious, solemn, and eerily enchanting, all at the same time. What else could this be if it was not the legendary Palace of Darkness? But where was this reflection coming from? Lin Li looked around with wide eyes, but there did not seem to be anything besides the gloomy gray skies, dark red water, and raging black flames. Even the demons that roamed everywhere seemed to have disappeared without a trace, much less the Palace of Darkness. "I must be seeing things," Lin Li stared with wide eyes as his mouth hung agape. Wasn't this too strange? The legendary Palace of Darkness did not exist, so why was there a reflection in the middle of the lake? Wasn't this too much of a joke? "See, I told you. If not for my help, you might not even find the true Palace of Darkness even if you ask around all your life." After staying quiet the whole time on Lin Li's back, Kanoris finally spoke. I'm not tooting my own horn, but besides the ruler of the Abyss of Tharlan, there could not have been more than 3 people in the whole of Amril who knew where the true Palace of Darkness is. Yes. Perhaps it was because he had been cooped up in the ring of endless storm for too long, but there seemed to be no end to Kanoris's singing his own praises. Unfortunately, Lin Li had a favor to ask of him, and thus he did not dare to cut him off out of frustration, and even had to add a few words of affirmation occasionally so as to satisfy this lonely hammer's twisted sense of achievement. Kanoris' praises for himself lasted a good 10 minutes, until Lin Li thought his ears might drop off and Kanoris realized there was nothing more that he could praise himself about. Only then did he happily say, "Alright, step aside, both of you." "Sure." Lin Li nodded before he quickly came up with an excuse and dragged Hutton to the side of the lake. Then, Lin Li heard an incredibly convoluted string of chants coming from afar. The chant was incredibly strange. It was not said in the common language, nor was it in the language of the High Elves. It was not even in language of the ancient deities nor that of the ancient dragons. It was a language that Lin Li had never heard of. However, the language had simple sounds, and was merely a mix of repeated vowels and consonants. There were even a few sounds that sounded like the growls of magical beasts. Based on that, Lin Li wondered if it could be the legendary language of the demons? Hutton fared no better than Lin Li. In fact, he had been in a constant state of shock ever since Kanoris made his appearance. It was not that Hutton was making a big fuss out of nothing, anybody in his position would have the same reaction. After all, his companion had suddenly produced a hammer that could chant spells. Anyone else would have been terrified to the point of insanity, so he was quite impressive to only be in a state of shock. Mage Felix, this, Hutton had a glazed look the whole time, and he even stuttered when he spoke. "Well, this," Lin Li scratched his head before seriously replying, "I picked it up along the way. At first, I thought it was left behind by a human blacksmith, but I didn't think that this fellow was capable of speaking. I think this must be some twisted demon, so you should be careful not to ever go too near. Who knows whether this fellow will hurt anyone." "I see." Hutton nodded firmly, but he started cursing away in his head. "Damn it, I knew you wouldn't speak the truth, but could you at least put in a bit of effort when you're lying? What do you mean a twisted demon? You think it's the first day I met you?" But of course, this was all in Hutton's head, and he would never dare say it aloud. Kanoris' chanting lasted a long time, almost as long as the ritual at the altar. He finally ended the long and mysterious chanting with a loud growl after a good 10 minutes. Then, Lin Li realized that the calm lake water started boiling over. It started out with a few ripples, but then the surface of the lake started bubbling. In the end, the water started churning, and the deafening sounds of the thrashing water filled their ears. It looked as though the whole lake was boiling. Boom! In an instant, a loud noise could be heard, and it sounded as if the world was collapsing. When Lin Li came back to his senses, a towering palace had abruptly emerged from the surface of the lake, spanning across nearly half of the lake. The sight of it emerging from the surface could only be described as breathtaking. Even though Hutton and Lin Li had seen many things in their life, they still couldn't help but stare with their mouth agape at that instant. It did not even cross their mind to dodge the splashing water as they were still in shock. Thankfully, Kanoris had thought of that, and had the both of them stay aside and out of the water's way. Nobody knew how long it was until Lin Li started to regain his senses as he studied the palace that had suddenly appeared with a face of disbelief. Mysterious, solemn, and eerily enchanting all at the same time. It was as if the reflection in the lake had suddenly been turned around. This is the Palace of Darkness? Hutton gulped, and his voice seemed to be unusually hoarse. I guess so. Lin Li was not much better than Hutton in that moment. After wondering what he should do for a while, it finally occurred to him that he should call Kanoris over to ask him a few questions. Lin Li calmed himself down before he picked Kanoris up and placed him on his back again, and used his mental strength to ask, "My noble soul traitor, where exactly is this chant from?" Huh? Don't bother asking where this chant is from, since you won't get it anyway. This chant has to be recited in the language of the demons, and unless you are of a devil's lineage, your chant won't have the same effect. As for why I know this chant, there's an interesting story behind it. What story? Something that can drive the Lord of the Abyss crazy. Kanoris suddenly stopped here. Alright, stop asking so many questions I won't answer anyway. You're a person of questionable credibility, so before you help me create a new body, I will not tell you this secret. Of course, if you can make me a new body as soon as possible, I may reconsider and tell you a part of it. What secret could be so powerful? I'm not blowing my own horn, but if you know this secret, you'll be able to do whatever you want in the endless abyss. and not one demon lord will dare disrespect you. Why else do you think Juresco tried so hard to capture me then? Wait a second, what did you say just now? Juresco tried so hard to capture you? Even though Kenora spoke quickly, Lin Li still picked up on the tiny detail. Say, noble soul traitor, didn't you tell me that you were once the lord of one of the levels of the abyss, and that Juresco sealed your soul in this hammer after attacking your palace? Did I say that? Kenora sheepishly said before he realized that he might as well continue with his bluff. Alright, take it that I did say that. This happened so many years ago, so how could I remember everything clearly? You must know that this happened over 1,300 years ago. Would you remember what you had for breakfast today, 1,300 years later? Alright, stop wasting time asking questions like that. If you don't hurry into the Palace of Darkness, I won't help you if Mephistos catches up with you. That's true. After hearing what Kenora said, Lin Li realized that now was not the time to ask questions. Mephistos was after the Palace of Darkness as well, and wouldn't he be inconveniencing himself if he met him here? Alright, Hutton, let's go. Lin Li intended to head into the Palace of Darkness after calling upon Hutton, but he suddenly heard the sound of wind coming from the surface of the lake. Lin Li looked up in shock, and saw a black figure flying over from afar. It was a thin figure in a black long robe. Who else could it be but Stephen? You finally caught up, Stephen. Hutton was pleasantly surprised to see that Stephen had caught up with them. There was no telling what was hidden in the Palace of Darkness, after all, and it was better to have Stephen's help if they met with any danger. Yes, I was delayed on the way. Stephen nodded at Hutton in a greeting, but did not even spare a glance at Lin Li. However, Lin Li did not mind it this time. Oh, no. More than that, Lin Li even warmly welcomed him despite his apparent nonchalance. Could it be that you met demons along the way? Mage, Stephen, I nearly forgot to ask you, how did you manage to find your way here? After finishing his question, Lin Li stared closely at Stephen. Only a few minion demons. A trace of panic flashed across his face, and if not for Lin Li staring closely, nobody would have noticed that. Don't forget that I, too, am an archmage. It is a basic skill for an archmage to track others using magical waves. Hee, I see, Lin Li smiled and nodded as though he never noticed that trace of panic. The door to the Palace of Darkness was still wide open, and after the trio finished their short chat, they flew into the open doors of the Palace of Darkness with the power of flight. As they passed through the door, Kenora moved on Lin Li's back. He's lying, I sense Mephistos' aura on him. If you're enjoying my content, please consider donating a coffee. Or checking out my shirts on TeePublic. Mephistos? Lin Li was only slightly taken aback before he masked his expression. This was not too big of a surprise, as he had already noticed a couple of loopholes in Stephen's words. Firstly, there could not be minion demons in the forest, as every level of the abyss was a closely guarded world. If a demon lord appeared somewhere, even the common demons would avoid the place, much less the minion demons. Furthermore, Stephen mentioned that he followed them here by tracking their magical waves. That was not incorrect in itself, as shadowing through tracking magical waves was indeed a basic skill that every archmage ought to know. Unfortunately, Stephen was dealing with Lin Li this time. Lin Li was a cautious man. Well, one could say he was paranoid. He was never without a magic shield when dealing with magical beasts below level 10, much less an existence as terrifying as Mephistos. He had already been taking notice of his magical waves along the way here, and every time Hutton stopped to recover his mana, Lin Li would inconspicuously lay down a magic dissipating field to silently get rid of any traces of his magical wave. Of course, this was not a foolproof solution, and anyone in the legendary realm would be able to disregard the existence of the magic dissipating field and locate him with just a bit of spiritual brand when tailing them. However, Stephen was quite clearly a good distance away from the legendary realm, and it was almost impossible for him to trace Lin Li with just a bit of spiritual brand. It would be unusual for Lin Li to not realize that something was off based on the loopholes in Stephen's words. Kenora's reminder was merely affirming Lin Li's conjecture. I got it. After replying to Kenora's, Lin Li continued ahead without confronting Stephen, carrying on as if nothing had happened. Lin Li had only ever seen a palace as massive as this once. It was the eternal furnace that was hidden in a space-time crack in the fire plume ridge. However, the two equally massive palaces were vastly different in style. The eternal furnace was modeled in the classical high elf style, grand, extravagant, and glamorous. Walking into the eternal furnace was like entering a high elf's art gallery, as every nook and cranny was flawlessly crafted thanks to the high elf's almost twisted sense of perfectionism. Even though it had been left vacant for over 1,300 years, and Osric had taken every valuable and placed it in his own mausoleum, Lin Li was still in awe over the artistic grandeur of the place. The Palace of Darkness, before him, was a different story. The second he walked into the place, Lin Li felt as though he had entered an eerie and sinister world. The walls on both sides were plastered with greenish algae, while the ground beneath him was wet and slimy. A cold draft swept past his ears and made his hair stand on ends. While he was flanked by corpse candles on both sides, the flickering white light only served to make the place even more eerie than it already was, and did not help in lighting up the place at all. There was no trace at all of the attics, balconies, gardens, and corridors that were so abundant in the eternal furnace. The Palace of Darkness gave off the vibe of an abandoned massive tomb from the prehistoric times, as the huge pillars were the only decorated pieces in the whole place. They came across two huge pillars every 100 meters or so, each one at least 100 meters in length, and requiring at least 10 humans to surround each of them. Somehow, the sculptures had been carved into the pillars, and each one of these sculptures looked ferocious and was filled with a vicious aura. Some of them had wings of flesh on their back, while others had horns on their heads. The only thing all the sculptures had in common was that they had at least one or two weapons in their hands. There were swords, machetes, hammers, chains, daggers, almost every weapon that Lin Li could think of could be found on one of the sculptures. What demon is this? Lin Li had been studying the abyss of Tharlan for some time, and even though he might not be at guru level in terms of knowledge about demons, he was definitely at master level. Still, he found that he did not recognize any of the sculptures carved on the huge pillars. There were 50 pillars and 50 sculptures, yet Lin Li did not know any of them. Kenora's voice held a rare admiration as he said, "These are ancient demon deities." Ancient demon deities? None of you humans know that during the prehistoric times, when prehistoric magical beasts roamed while the dragons and titans fought to rule the world and the high elves were born from the Tree of Eternity, there were also 99 ancient demon deities who created the 99 levels of the Abyss world. 99 ancient demon deities? There are only 50 here. These 50 ancient demon deities have fallen. What about the other 49? If you're able to enter the 50th level of the Abyss, you might get a chance to meet them. Are you kidding me? Lin Li retorted angrily. The Abyss beyond the 50th level was no place for a human. Even the great High Lord Osric and his magic legion could not go beyond the 20th level when they attacked the Abyss, much less a measly mage like Lin Li. The difference between the 20th and 50th level of the Abyss world was so vast that they might as well have been different worlds. Before the 20th level, some greater demons had a chance to become the local demon lord, yet after the 50th level, they were merely spawns that could be readily disposed of. Nobody in the whole of Amrel had any idea what it was like after the 50th level of the Abyss. After all, not one person had managed to return alive from beyond the 40th level of the Abyss since the Dark Ages. Hence, anything beyond the 40th level was a mystery to humans. Come to think of it, my great soul trader, I see that you're pretty familiar with the Palace of Darkness. Nonsense, Kenora's voice brimmed with disdain. But I'll advise you to drop it and not ask questions. If you're meant to know, I'll let you know with time, but what you're not meant to know I'll never tell you no matter how much you press me. Say, Kenoris, you're a great soul trader, after all, surely you know that the heart of doing business lies in being honest? If you're always so mysterious, it's not going to help our partnership, Lin Li said unhappily. Even an idiot would be able to detect the threat in his words, much less a freak like Kenoris, who had been around since who knew when. After being silent for about half a minute, Kenoris visibly relaxed as he spoke. It's not that I don't want to tell you about it, it's just that those profound secrets are beyond what you can comprehend at your power level now. So what if I let you know that there is a branch of the Tree of Eternity in the 30th level of the Abyss that could be crafted into a magic staff much more powerful than the one you wield now? Well, do you have the guts to venture down there to retrieve it? Isn't there anything more practical than that? Something more practical? Kanoris thought for a moment. There is, it's in the Palace of Darkness. Tell me about it. I'll have to start from the origins of the Lord of Darkness. I told you earlier that the Lord of Darkness is actually the shadow of the Dragon of Destruction, but do you know why the Dragon of Destruction had cast its own shadow into the abyss? If my guess is correct, it's because the Dragon of Destruction wanted to absorb the energy of the Abyss of Tharlan. Well, you've guessed it, Kanoris' voice held a trace of surprise. That's right, the Dragon of Destruction had cast its own shadow into the Abyss of Tharlan in order to absorb the dark force and evil force of the Abyss of Tharlan. This is the only way it could hide from the other 4 dragon aspects. Why does it have to hide from the other 4 dragon aspects? Have you forgotten what the 5 dragon aspects are for? They are guardians of the 10 basic rules of the whole of Anril, including light, kindness, darkness, evilness, time, space, start and end. These 10 rules stand against each other yet rely on each other to coexist while maintaining an incredibly peculiar balance. Do you dare imagine what would happen should this balance be disrupted? If the balance between the 10 basic rules is disrupted? Lin Li paused for a second before he broke out in a cold sweat. It would be nothing short of a tragedy for Anril if the balance between the 10 basic rules was disrupted. It would be scarier than if prehistoric magical beasts charged out from a crack between time and space. That would be an upturned world with no order at all. So the Dragon of Destruction has fallen? Nobody in Anril knows for sure why the Dragon of Destruction has fallen, but according to a High Elf's High Lords from when I was still following Osric, the Dragon of Destruction's fall was most likely linked to the Immortal King. Frack. But Osric thought that the Dragon of Destruction had not completely fallen, and that the 2 basic rules it watched over had to have been inherited by somebody, or else Anril would have descended into chaos. Anyway, Osric made many conjectures like this. And if you have an opportunity to enter the High Lord's mausoleum one day, try to find Osric's diary. There are many secrets in that diary, some of which even the High Elf's Queen was not aware of. I'll keep that in mind. Lin Li nodded before revealing a look of doubt. But what has this got to do with the practical benefits you were talking about? Patience, my friend, let me tell you about it slowly. Kanoris paused before continuing. I was managing a huge deal in the Abyss of Tharlan, one that involved more than 10,000 souls, the year the Dragon of Destruction's shadow descended into the Abyss of Tharlan. The Lord of the Abyss of Tharlan then was still Mephisto's, as the shadow of the Dragon of Destruction had not had the opportunity to overthrow him yet. I had an opportunity to catch a glimpse of this future Lord of Darkness, and as the great soul trader you know I am, I was able to tell with just one glance that this powerful demon's soul was not complete. It was almost as if this was just a soul fragment of an even more powerful existence. And then? What happened after that proved that my guess was right. The Lord of Darkness was not a demon born in the abyss, but the projection of Azardas, one of the 5 great dragon aspects. Kanoris boasted happily before sighing as he added, Azardas was definitely one of the most powerful beings to ever roam Anril. Even a fragment of his soul could easily triumph Mephisto's and take over the throne as the Lord of the Abyss of Tharlan. Whoever can obtain the power held in this soul fragment would be. Is Azardas' soul fragment the practical benefit you were talking about? Lin Li gradually understood as he listened. That's right. Stop joking with me. Yes, you're right, a mage can absorb power from a soul fragment, but that must be done under the owner's consent. You think I'll be capable of stealing a dragon aspect's power, given my capabilities now? Moreover, the Dragon of Destruction had fallen so many years ago, and I'm afraid the soul fragment from so many years ago would already have disappeared without a trace. You think I'm joking? No. The great soul trader I am would never say something without meaning it. Think about it, the Dragon of Destruction fell during the prehistoric times, when the High Elves were only beginning to rise, but the shadow in the Abyss of Tharlan had lived on even till the Dark Age. But don't worry about how you're going to obtain the power from the soul fragment. I dare say that I'm the greatest soul trader to ever live. I'll definitely help you find a way to obtain the power from the soul fragment. What you need to do now is to find that soul fragment and leave the abyss of Tharland safely. No matter what you do not get caught by Mephistos, or else even I dare not imagine the consequences. I'll think about how to do it. Lin Li's heart started palpitating after he listened to Canoris. That was the soul fragment of the Dragon of Destruction Azardas. It held more than just a portion of the Dragon of Destruction's strength. It also contained much of the Dragon of Destruction's memories and experience, which was what was the most important to Lin Li. Lin Li was now a stone's throw away from the legendary realm, and all he needed was one last step for him to break into the legendary realm. If he could get a hold of this soul fragment, he would be able to easily break through to the legendary realm just with the experience and memories it held alone, without even having to absorb any of its powers. Mage Felix, look at this quickly. Just as Lin Li was muttering to himself, Hutton suddenly stopped in front. What is it? Lin Li paused when he heard his panicked voice. Hutton was a high-ranking archmage, after all. Just what could make him lose his cool like this? Lin Li hurried over with a look of doubt before he realized that this was a dead end. Oh, no. Well, not quite a dead end. It was just that it would be quite tricky to move on. There was a massive, circular structure in front of Lin Li. It looked like one of those fighting arenas that were common in the Dark Age, only it was far bigger than any of those from the Dark Age. It had to be the size of at least a few Black Cloud's towns, and the arena was about 200 meters below the platform where the spectators sat. It was as though they were looking down the edge of a cliff. The worst thing was that all was not calm beneath this cliff. As Lin Li looked down from the spectators' platform, he could clearly see that there were hundreds of cages at the edge of the arena, and there were many demons and magical beasts in each cage. Howls and growls came from every direction, making Lin Li frown when he heard it. Bloody hell, Lin Li felt his head throb suddenly. The Palace of Darkness was a strange place indeed. Lin Li was still wondering to himself why they hadn't seen a single guard at all as they walked into this place. The only thing they had seen were the sculptures on the pillars. Now, he knew that the Palace of Darkness did have guards, after all, and not just a few of them, but a whole army. This arena filled with demons and magical beasts was more powerful than any guard. Moreover, this was a path that they had to take in order to enter the inner parts of the Palace of Darkness. They had to cross through the arena, and there was no shortcut they could take. Well, an archmage could fly, but this arena was filled with anti-flight mageweths. If they still went ahead and used the levitation spell, they would risk a drop of more than 100 meters if their mana was disrupted by the mageweths. They would fall to their deaths before they even got to face the demons and magical beasts. Hey, Canoris, come out for a minute. What is it? Come take a look. Do you know this place? Of course I do. The hammer with Canoris' soul sealed in it floated suddenly and twirled around the spectator platform before firmly saying, "This is the Abyss Arena." What's that? There are 99 levels in the Abyss, and countless demons live in each level. Some of these demons will only remain a nether spawn or a minion demon, but some of them will keep evolving to become a true demon, or even a greater demon. Once they become a greater demon, they will have the opportunity to fight for the throne to become the Lord of the Abyss. That was what Mephistos did then, and so did the Lord of Darkness. Anyway, the Abyss is a fair but cruel world. Every demon born in the Abyss has a chance to sit on the coveted throne as long as they are able to triumph over the current Lord of the Abyss. However, before they can do that, they will have to go through a test, and that is the Abyss Arena. This is it? Yes, only the greater demons that make it out of the Abyss Arena alive have the chance to challenge the current Lord of the Abyss. Bloody hell, I thought you said that the Lord of Darkness had already fallen. Lin Li felt his head throb suddenly. Are you kidding me? So this is something used to test greater demons. I did say that the Lord of Darkness had fallen, but I never said that the Abyss Arena disappeared after his fall. Truth be told, the Abyss Arena has nothing to do with the Lord of Darkness, as this is something left behind by the ancient demon deities, and so are the rules of the fight. Unless the Lord of Darkness became an ancient deity himself, his fall would not affect the Abyss Arena in any way. The Abyss Arena will continue to exist until the ancient demon deities have completely fallen. Bloody hell. No way, this was too risky for them. This place was used to test greater demons, it'd be too dangerous for 3 archmages to barge in like that. If something were to happen, Lin Li might not make it out alive even if he had the holy light and the gloomy dark to protect himself. Lin Li thought about it, but refused to give up, so he secretly let out a warlock's eyes to try and find a shortcut. Unfortunately, countless greater demons had tried to do the same for thousands of years, only to fail. How could Lin Li succeed, just like that? The warlock's eyes circled around the Abyss Arena once before returning to Lin Li's hand again. It's no use. If there was any other way to get past the Abyss Arena, there would be way more than just 37 greater demons that fought for the throne of the Abyss of Tharlan. See those mageweths? Those were left behind by the Lord of the 72nd level of the Abyss, Kazak, the Lord of the Purgatory. With the cover of these mageweth, even a legendary mage would not be able to pass through the Abyss Arena using the power of flight, much less the few of you. That damned Kazak. Lin Li gritted his teeth and cursed. This was because Lin Li knew that whatever Kanoris said was true. Under the cover of these anti-flight mageweths, even a legendary mage would not be able to use the power of flight to pass through the Abyss Arena. How ironic. Lin Li was a guru of inscription himself, yet here he was, stumped by an advanced mageweth. It was not difficult for Lin Li to get rid of these anti-flight mageweths. There were at least 50 methods he had at his disposal. The problem was that none of these methods allowed him to work from a distance, as every single method required him to be within 10 meters of the mageweth. That was short death. Alright, Lin Li stood there for a good minute before he accepted his loss, and indignantly spoke to Kanoris. What the hell is the rule for this bloody Abyss Arena? The rule of the Abyss Arena is that there are no rules. The second you enter the Abyss Arena, the fight begins. Those cages you see below will open and release the demons and magical beasts inside. Remember, this is truly a fight to death, and there is no victory or defeat, only life and death. Only when one of you falls will the fight end. Then what kind of monsters will we meet? Who knows? Even the Lord of Darkness has no say over which cage will open. Kanoris suddenly started smiling with gloating. But one thing for sure is that no matter which cage opens, your enemy will be nothing less than a level 18. Well, that is the most scary thing about the Abyss Arena. Every magical beast here was hunted down by the Lord of the Abyss of Tharlan, and it was even said that there was once a level 21 two-headed poison flame dragon closed in one of these cages. The greater demons here are even more formidable. Almost all of them are prisoners of war from the Abyss battles. When the Lord of Darkness was still sitting on the throne, he had basically burned down the first 35 levels of the Abyss with his battles, and there were countless demons taken prisoner. Even greater demons and demon lords have once appeared in these cages. Who knows if you might meet one of the previous lords of the Abyss. Why don't you hurry along to your death? Lin Li cursed angrily. But you do have an advantage. What advantage? When the Lord of Darkness was still in power, the greater demons could only enter the Abyss Arena alone, so no matter how powerful the armies of the greater demons were, they had to rely on themselves to win against the magical beasts and demons in the Abyss Arena. Since the Lord of Darkness had fallen, the 3 of you may enter together and increase your chances of survival. F***CK. Lin Li nearly cursed again. Now that Kanoris mentioned that, Lin Li suddenly remembered that Steven had been acting suspiciously. Who knew what he was up to? It would not be an issue in other circumstances, but now that they were about to enter the Abyss Arena, there would be huge trouble if this fellow tried something funny. Why don't I just get rid of Steven first? A thought flashed through Lin Li's mind, but he quickly dismissed it. It would only arouse Mephisto's suspicion if he got rid of Steven first. Lin Li did not want to have to deal with this ex-lord of the Abyss so early. In Lin Li's opinion, it was a good thing that there was Mephisto's aura on Steven. He would be able to use this aura to deceive Mephistos through Steven and stall this legendary level spirit walker. It sounded almost too good to be true to trick a level 20 greater demon one, but it was not nearly as hard as it seemed, especially for Lin Li. After all, he had a demon magic lamp that had the Lord of Nightmares sealed in it. The greatest strength of the Lord of Nightmares was that he could manipulate dreams and soundlessly create false memories. Mephistos was not here himself, after all, and everything he heard and saw had to be done through the aura on Stephen. It would not be as easy to see through the dream created by the Lord of Nightmares, then. It was not an issue for Lin Li to create the dream either. All he had to do was use a sleeping potion, and Stephen would be out for weeks. The Lord of Nightmares would be able to do whatever he wanted in that time. With this reason alone, Lin Li decided he was not going to get rid of Stephen. Moreover, he was presenting Lin Li with a chance to kill Mephistos. But this was too risky, and if he was not left with no alternative, Lin Li would never consider taking such risk. After discussing with Canoris, Lin Li then spent another several minutes to go through the situation with his companions. Anyway, this abyss arena is kind of tricky, and there is no way we will be able to avoid it. The two of you should start preparing, it will be a difficult fight later on. Why should we believe what you said? Stephen continued to stand against Lin Li as usual. You can choose not to. Lin Li had no intention to explain at all, and all he did was spare Stephen a hostile glance before he took out the demon magic lamp and chanted softly. Before Hutton and Stephen even realized what was going on, the growl of a dragon could be heard. Humorous WYRM. Hutton's eyes grew as wide as saucers. This was his second time seeing a humorous WYRM. The first time was with the Sire Bandits, when the humorous WYRM suddenly appeared and killed hundreds of the Sire Bandits in the blink of an eye. Hutton still held on to a trace of hope that this mage Felik was able to summon a humorous WYRM only because of some special circumstances, like giving offerings, or perhaps there was a limit to how many times he could summon one. After all, it was unheard of for an archmage to be able to summon a legendary realm creature. However, now it seemed like this fellow was able to summon a humorous WYRM as and when he liked. There was even no need for any summoning ritual, all it took was a chant. This fellow was even more terrifying than Sendros. The appearance of the humorous WYRM came as a shock indeed, as even the usually composed and self-assured Stephen could not hide his stiff expression with a hint of fear when he saw the humorous WYRM. While he might not know what the Supreme Council meant nor the power of a maze mageweth, he surely knew the extent of damage a humorous WYRM could inflict. Such was the power of a legendary creature, everyone else who was not of the legendary realm would fear it. A legendary creature, even one as basic as a humorous WYRM, was as strong as an army. Any archmage above level 15 would be able to destroy a city easily with the help of a humorous WYRM, and they could even be as powerful as a legendary realm powerhouse together. There was no way Stephen did not fear something as powerful as this. Stephen had mixed feelings: envy, jealousy, regret, fear. Even he could not describe what he was feeling. This Felik was too lucky indeed to own a humorous WYRM he could summon. How could this be? How could he gain the recognition of a humorous WYRM just as an archmage? He must have used some tricks, that's right, that must be it. His contract with the humorous WYRM can't be a true summoning contract. When he thought of this, Stephen's eyes lit up, and he began to look at the humorous WYRM with greed in his eyes. The contract that a mage had with their summoning creatures was crucial. The most reliable one was a soul contract, where they each left a spiritual brand on each other, which would allow them to communicate using mental strength and share memories and knowledge. Once the soul contract was signed, even death would not terminate it. There were other less binding contracts other than the soul contract, for example, a summoning contract, an equals contract, an offering contract, etc. These contracts were not very binding, and as long as a criterion was fulfilled, it could be terminated anytime. Also, if the summoner died, the contract would be terminated immediately as well. Wait and see. Mephistos promised me, after all. Stephen couldn't help letting out a sinister laugh when he thought of this. How could his greed escape Lin Li's eyes? Truth be told, Lin Li had summoned the humorous WYRM not only for battle, but also to test Stephen. With the change in his demeanor alone, Lin Li was at least half sure that Stephen had the intention of killing him. But this was not a good time to deal with Stephen, hence, Lin Li merely spared him a glance before he climbed on the humorous WYRM's back. "Alright, let's go." After sitting down firmly on the humorous WYRM's back, Lin Li tightly held his bone magic staff and grabbed onto a bone of the humorous WYRM with his other hand. Using his powerful mental strength, Lin Li coaxed the humorous WYRM into charging towards the center of the abyss arena with a strong chilly aura. Hutton flew with Lin Li, but Stephen hesitated for a moment before he cast a levitation spell as well. The three young mages landed in the center of the abyss arena, and the door to one of the cages immediately opened. "We're in luck." Lin Li looked from afar and felt his heart relax. There were three magical beasts charging out from one of the cages. They were not unfamiliar to Lin Li, level 18 Rainbow Manticore King, said to be the servant of minotaurs. The rainbow-colored spike on their tail was their greatest weapon, as besides containing deadly poison, it could also release 7 types of elemental magic. The level of the magic was determined by the level of the Rainbow Manticore King, but the beast was usually below level 10. Even though it was released at an incredibly fast speed, the spells were usually of no threat to an archmage. However, once they reached level 18, they would become true Rainbow Manticore Kings, and while they'd experience great improvements in strength, their elemental magic could also reach level 15. Some mutants might also master destructive magic like 1,000 miles of ice and pyroblasts. But mutant or not, these three Rainbow Manticore Kings were not too big of an issue for Lin Li. Well, not quite as much as a dozen of Aztecs above level 18. The three Rainbow Manticore Kings moved incredibly fast. They had only just charged out from their cage a moment ago, but they were almost at the humorous WYRM's side now. However, what awaited them was a mouthful of ice flames. The humorous WYRM was a legendary creature, and even though it was under the control of an archmage, it was still incredibly powerful. The ice flame immediately covered an area of at least 100 meters in radius, and the ice and death energy permeated the place so densely that even the magical wave felt stifling. Even though the three Rainbow Manticore Kings were powerful magical beasts above level 18, they still could not help but shy away from the powerful legendary level creature. However, even though the three Rainbow Manticore Kings retreated, they did not back off too far away, as they still hovered about the edge of the abyss arena. With a blood-chilling look, they kept their eyes on the humorous WYRM as well as Lin Li on its back. The Rainbow Manticore Kings were crafty magical beasts by nature, and had a natural knack for hunting. Moreover, the three Rainbow Manticore Kings before them were above level 18, and their intelligence was not far off from humans. The humorous WYRM made them feel threatened with its aura, hence, they retreated to the edge of the abyss arena. However, that did not mean that they had given up. Truth be told, even the weaker Hutton and Stephen could detect that the magical wave around them was becoming more intense, especially the earth, water, fire, and wind magical elements. They seemed to be boiling over. Hutton and Stephen's expressions soured immediately. It was no secret that the Rainbow Manticore King was well versed in elemental magic. How could these two archmages not know that given their experiences? As they looked at the magical elements around them become more and more intense, it would be a lie to say that they were not anxious. Even Lin Li did not dare let down his guard. This was how powerful the reputation of the Rainbow Manticore Kings was. They were the servants of the prehistoric magical beasts, the minotaurs, and were powerful magical beasts born in the maze. There might be 1,000 miles of ice coming from one of those spikes in an instant. Lin Li stood firmly on the humorous WYRM's back and held the ether staff in his hand. Without needing a word, an elemental shield had appeared. It was made up of the earth, water, fire, and wind solar spheres that circled endlessly around Lin Li. Even if a legendary mage were to attack Lin Li now, they would have to use at least 2 spells to break the shield. However, Lin Li was not in a rush to attack even after conjuring up the elemental shield. Instead, all he did was to stand on the back of the humorous WYRM and carefully observe the 3 Rainbow Manticore Kings from afar. The Rainbow Manticore Kings were difficult to deal with because they were impossible to see through. Nobody knew what magic would come out of the spikes on their tails, It would not be much of an issue if they were simple spells, but one would be in trouble if they were mutants who could use powerful magic like Thousand Miles of Ice or Pyroblast. Hutton and Steven aside, even Lin Li would be done for if he met with such destructive instantaneous magic without a magic shield. Moreover, Lin Li had a hunch that these three Rainbow Manticore Kings commanded magic that was not as simple as mere Thousand Miles of Ice or Pyroblast. This was the Abyss Arena, after all, and it was used to test the prospective lords of the Abyss. All the greater demons that had sat on the throne of the Palace of Darkness had survived this test. Who knew how many earth-shattering fights had occurred here throughout all these years? The Rainbow Manticore Kings could not be as simple as they appeared if they could survive for so long. Hence, Lin Li did not dare to attack carelessly. After all, he was still an archmage, and not a true legendary mage. Once his elemental shield wore off, he'd need another 10 seconds to replenish it, and if the three Rainbow Manticore Kings suddenly unleashed their magic and it was a powerful one, Lin Li would be done for. And truth was, Lin Li had every right to worry. The three Rainbow Manticore Kings had only retreated for about 10 seconds before the Abyss Arena's magical wave changed drastically. There was suddenly a chilly and sinister aura amidst the boiling magical elements, and this aura was growing at a tremendous speed. It was only in the blink of an eye that this aura covered the four magical elements. F***CK. Lin Li's expression changed. He was very familiar with this chilly and sinister aura. Ever since he'd come to Amril, he experienced many encounters with energy similar to this, in the Shadowglen, Sire Town, Scar of Death. That was right, this sudden and strange aura was death energy in its purest form. This death energy devoured the other four magical elements in the arena in less than 10 seconds, and started growing at a frightening speed. Lin Li could even feel that this death energy was so powerful that it rivaled legendary level beings the likes of Sendros. God damn it, why am I so unlucky? Lin Li understood everything at last. These three Rainbow Manticore Kings were rare mutants indeed. Their very existence would change what everyone knew about Rainbow Manticore Kings. If he lived to tell the tale of the Abyss Arena, he would create a sensation in the whole of Amril. There had not been such a strange Rainbow Manticore King in Amril for thousands of years. Their innate magic was not of earth, water, fire, or wind elements, but of true necromagic. Setting the issue of the Rainbow Manticores aside, this was impossible if they considered the timeline of events. There were many views regarding the origins of necromagic in Amril, but there was one thing that they were unanimous about. It was that the first appearance of necromagic was slightly after the birth of the High Elves, which was to say that necromancers first appeared somewhere in the prehistoric times and the Dark Age. But what about the Rainbow Manticores? Legend had it that they were the servants of Minotaurs, and had spent an eternity in the maze. Only when the High Elves appeared and the prehistoric magical beasts started to decline in numbers did some of the Rainbow Manticores manage to escape the control of Minotaurs and leave the maze. In other words, the Rainbow Manticores had a longer history than necromagic. Magical beasts were not mages, and all their magic was innate rather than learnt. This magic came from a brand on their soul, and was passed on through generations. This inheritance was something that transcended time and space. Even after thousands of years passed, there'd be no change in this inheritance. Of course, there might be mutants along the way, like these Rainbow Manticores. There would be a Rainbow Manticore that could conjure Thousand Miles of Ice or use Pyroblast every few centuries or so, and it'd be called a mutant. But no matter how they mutated, there was no way the mutation could be so drastic. The Rainbow Manticores inherited elemental magic from their ancestors, so how could there suddenly appear one that used necromagic? This overthrew the very law of inheritance. They were as good as two different species. However, that was not the worst part for Lin Li. After all, no matter how a Rainbow Manticore mutated, it did not have much to do with Lin Li. Necromagic was powerful, but it was nothing he could not deal with. What perplexed Lin Li the most was that these three Rainbow Manticore Kings shared the same soul. Now that was tricky. The same soul, but in different bodies. This was not hard to comprehend, for it literally meant that different bodies were sharing the same soul. This was something that Lin Li had just discovered as well. He did not notice at first, but after the death energy devoured the other magical elements, Lin Li suddenly noticed something amiss. At that instance, the magical wave in the abyss arena seemed unusually unified. Besides the slight disturbance caused by the elemental shield, it was as though all the magical waves were emitted by one person. It was not unusual to see magical beasts sharing the same soul, as there had been at least 10 such cases in the Felon Kingdom since the Dark Age. However, none of these magical beasts lived past 20 years, for a simple reason. It was too much for one soul to take if it was shared by different bodies, especially so for magical beasts whose innate magic came from a brand in their soul. Even the most powerful of souls would not be able to withstand this, but now, these 3 rainbow manticore kings sharing the same soul stood before Lin Li, and were conjuring up some very powerful magic. Now that was a problem for Lin Li. These rainbow manticore kings were only round level 18, or at most level 19, but after Lin Li realized that they were sharing the same soul, his expression changed. 3 rainbow manticore kings sharing the same soul would be unusually powerful, and even by the most conservative estimate, they would be at least level 20 in terms of combat strength, but the fact that they could use necromagic made it even worse. Who knew, they might even be close to level 21. Moreover, Lin Li could not even be sure that these damned rainbow manticore kings were not hiding any more secrets. While all of this sounded complicated, it had happened merely in the blink of an eye, and the death energy had devoured all the elemental power within 10 seconds. Now, darkness loomed over the abyss arena. Why am I so lucky? Lin Li's face turned green the minute darkness exploded. This damned luck, I could strike lottery with it. How is it that these rainbow manticore kings are all well versed in necromagic, and it has to be level 20 dark decay too? Necromagic had always been viewed as magic of the fallen in Amril, as mages thought that only those who were evil at heart would pursue something like that. The number of mages studying necromagic started declining 1,300 years after the Dark Age, and necromagic became more and more mysterious in the eyes of the people, so much so that the words dark decay had become unfamiliar to most mages, and they had even forgotten about the very existence of necromagic. Only someone like Sendros, who was incredibly well versed in necromagic and had spent a lot of time researching about necromancers, would know something about dark decay. Or perhaps someone like Apophis, a freak who had lived for over 1,300 years and had experienced the war in the ending years of the Dark Age. Someone who had personally seen the damage that the dark decay could do on the battlefield. Lin Li was probably the only one besides them who knew about the dark decay. This was because Lin Li had seen what the dark decay was capable of for himself. Lin Li was still a hunter who used a bow then. He had been carefully treading at the edge of the Well of the Sun, trying to look for a way into it. Lin Li came across the soul of a high elf then. He had already forgotten the name of the high elf, and the only thing he remembered was that the soul of the high elf was capable of incredibly powerful necromagic, including the dark decay. The soul of the high elf had used the dark decay to wipe out the whole of Lin Li's team, and that was a team of 80 high-ranking people. They were so powerful in combat that they would have been capable of taking down a small city. Lin Li could still remember that the whole world seemed to have fallen into darkness when the soul of the high elf used the dark decay. The howls and cries of spirits filled the darkness, while toxic fumes permeated the air and bone spears flew from every direction. In the dark, his team members seemed to have lost every ounce of their combat abilities. The mages were unable to chant, the warriors could not hold their weapons in their hands, the priests seemed to lose faith in their prayers, and the hunters could not hit their targets at all. The dark decay was like a vicious spiral, pulling the whole team into the abyss of despair. It was hardly even a fight, as Lin Li's team was unable to retaliate at all. The team that was capable of taking down a small city was wiped out in merely 20 minutes, hence, for a very long period of time, nobody dared to go near the Well of the Sun. Even Lin Li himself only dared to challenge it again after he spent 2 months gathering all the information he could about necromagic and found a way to curb the effect of the dark decay. While the dark decay was not as infamous as the Tide of Death or the Plague of the Undead amongst level 20 necromagic spells, it was no easier to deal with than either of these in Lin Li's opinion. The dark decay already had some features of a magical domain on some levels. For example, it consisted of many other spells. Lin Li knew from personal experience that once someone fell into the dark decay, they'd be tormented by countless vengeful spirits that were hard to deal with. Besides theurgy and magic, the only thing that could do any damage to them was a magical weapon. Moreover, there were also flying bone spears and toxic fumes in the dark decay, making it a place worse than hell. To make things worse, the dark decay also greatly reduced one's combat abilities, and if one did not have mental strength that was strong enough, it became incredibly difficult to cast spells and use theurgy under the influence of the death energy. Mages at lower levels might even find that they'd take 10 times longer to cast the same spell. Besides that, the dark decay also weakened the mind and the body, hence, warriors and bandits would find it nearly impossible to move an inch when they were caught in the dark decay. If they were not careful enough, they might even become possessed by the vengeful spirits and turn on their own teammates. Damn it, what the hell's wrong with these rainbow manticore kings? Lin Li could not comprehend why these rainbow manticore kings, which were supposedly gifted with elemental magic, were suddenly using such ghastly necromagic. Could it be the incarnation of the dragon of destruction messing with me? Lin Li's eyes lit up when he thought of that. That's right, that must be it. No matter the fact that these rainbow manticore kings are mutants or share the same soul, there's no way that they would be able to go against the rule of innate magic inheritance and suddenly become capable of using the dark decay. Magical beasts inherited magic through a brand in their soul, and this rule was one that was set in stone. Even the high elves who proclaimed themselves to be deities could not change this fact, so the only way this nearly miraculous feat could be possible was if it was done by the dragon of destruction. Lin Li suddenly smiled when he thought of this. It was not common to see rainbow manticore kings sharing the same soul, and while these two rainbow manticore kings were only around level 18, their magical crystal was definitely well above level 18 due to the fact that they were sharing the same soul. According to Lin Li's guess, it might even be a legendary magical crystal, and a special one at that. The mana in the magical crystal was not so important to Lin Li. What he cared about more was whether there was a trace of the dragon of destruction's power in it. While it might not be much, Lin Li might be able to use this trace of power to decipher the properties of both darkness and evilness after he combined both mana and rule power. Of course, this would be after he reached the legendary realm. In the future, he might even be able to incorporate these two rule powers into his own magical domain. This dragon of destruction is a pretty loyal fellow, already dead for so long, yet he still left his old friends such a huge gift. Lin Li could not help but smile at the thought of what he could do with the magical crystal. As for how he was going to get the magical crystal, Lin Li was not worried about it at all. The dark decay was really nothing much to Lin Li, who had spent 2 months studying it. Of course, this was only Lin Li's opinion, and not quite what Stephen and Hutton thought. While these two young archmages were not familiar with the dark decay, they could still feel the strong death energy that felt like a downward spiral. They both knew that this matter concerned more than just 2 level 18 magical beasts. The torrential death energy felt as though it might devour the world any second, and even though they were both rare talents in magic and most prominent archmages in the whole of Breezy Plains, they still felt somewhat helpless before this death energy that seemed to drag them in. At that moment, they felt as though they were flames flickering in a storm, as though they might be extinguished by a gust of wind any moment. They held up a flame shield almost simultaneously. Then, the place was suddenly enveloped by darkness as the abyss arena was plunged into pitch-black darkness in a split second. Painful howls and cries filled their ears, while sharp bone spears sliced through the air, the sounds ringing in their ears. Toxic fumes started spreading everywhere, and their inky green hue made them resemble poisonous snakes. In the overwhelming presence of the dark decay, even the two high-ranking archmages could not help losing their cool for a moment. Bloody hell, Hutton kept chanting as he used arcane missile to shoot at vengeful spirits that were near him, but the dark decay was a level 20 necromagic spell, and could create thousands and thousands of vengeful spirits. No matter how fast he could conjure up arcane missiles, there was no way he would be able to wipe them out all at once. Furthermore, the gargantuan strength of the dark decay never ceased to erode Hutton's mental strength, which made chanting more and more difficult as though he was trying to walk through a swamp. Each arcane missile took more effort to conjure, and the flame shield on his body became weaker and weaker, Stephen was in no better state at the moment. The flame shield was of no use against the piercing bone spears at all, and Stephen had no choice but to force the time it took to replenish his mana to a minimum so as to keep up with the speed it took to replenish his flame shield. However, everyone including him knew that this was not sustainable for long, as it caused great damage to his mental strength every time he did that, and might even cause him to drop by 1 level. "Hutton, think of something, we have to leave this place." Stephen's voice was filled with panic. The death energy of the dark decay basically forced one into hopelessness. Stephen had never felt so afraid before in his life. It was like he had stepped into quicksand, and the more he struggled and cried for help, the deeper he sank. "It's no use, Stephen, we can't run," Hutton gave a forced smile. He was much calmer compared to the panicking Stephen. This whirlpool-like darkness had sealed the abyss arena. It was hard to even move, much less escape. Then what do we do? Wait for Mage Felix to do something. Bloody hell, what kind of situation are we in? Yet you still, Stephen was so agitated that he almost could not catch his breath as he struggled to keep up the flame shield while angrily pointing at the center of the abyss arena. "Look for yourself, that guy can barely defend himself. How do you expect him to save us?" Stephen was pointing at the only bright spot in the center of the abyss arena. The mage Hutton regarded as their savior was standing there unmoving and trying all he could to maintain the illuminating spell. Ridiculous, Stephen laughed in anger, for he could not comprehend what this was about at all. After all, they could not even withstand the death energy with flame shields. What made this fellow think that he would be fine with an illuminating spell? Was he crazy or just stupid? Wait and see. "No, we can't afford to wait anymore," Stephen said with a panicked look as he retrieved a purple crystal from his pocket. Hutton used arcane missiles to shoot at the spirits while turning back to explain himself to Stephen. "These 2 rainbow manticore kings are very unusual. If I'm not wrong, they must be sharing a soul as in the legend. Magical beasts sharing the same soul are much more powerful than their birth level when they use their innate magic, and I reckon that they are already at legendary level. You and I are not enough to go against them, we can only wait for Mage Felix to do something." Unfortunately, it was in vain. This was because all of Stephen's attention was on the purple crystal in his hand. He remembered clearly that the powerful greater demon once told him that when he was in danger, he could crush the crystal, and the greater demon would help him once. Stephen originally wanted to save this chance for the end. He had been picturing a scene in his mind ever since he got hold of the crystal. Once the 3 of them found the throne in the Palace of Darkness, he would suddenly crush the purple crystal and summon the powerful greater demon. How exciting would it be to see the expression on Hutton's and Felix's face? A pity that he could not afford to wait any longer. The strange magic released by the 2 rainbow manticore kings rendered him hopeless, and if he waited any longer, he might even lose the chance to crush the crystal. Was he going to wait for that Felix like Hutton, then? Stephen spat angrily. All he knew was to summon the humorous WYRM, but this fool did not know how to use it. Surely a powerful greater demon would be better than that. Wait and see, after the greater demon saves me from this damned necromagic, I'll ask for his help once again to snatch the humorous WYRM from this fool. Of course, it will be even better if the greater demon's willing to get rid of these 2 as well. But even if the greater demon was not willing, Stephen had other ways to do it too. After all, the darkness prophecy spell scrolls were still in his hands. Even if he had to use a scroll to get rid of them, he would. This concerned the relics left behind by Juresco, after all, so he could not afford any mistakes. Unfortunately, just as he was silently plotting, the bit of light in the center of the abyss arena suddenly became brighter. How? How is that possible? Stephen thought he was seeing things. The illuminating spell had had only a faint light, so how could it become so bright suddenly? This level of brightness was comparable to the sun's. How could it be from an illuminating spell? It seemed like the faint light had turned into the blinding sun in the blink of an eye, and this blindingly bright sun was even growing brighter still. Stephen was frozen in his spot, and did not know what to do with the crystal in his hands either. Mage Felix is finally doing something, Hutton mopped at the sweat on his forehead as he watched the light grow brighter, a relieved expression on his face. But even though he had every confidence in Lin Li, he still could not understand how the light that seemed to come from the sun was conjured up. This was against the rules of magic. How could an illuminating spell be so blinding? Not even a legendary mage would be able to use an illuminating spell in such a shocking manner. This was no longer a problem of mental strength, as there was no way one could distort the spell in such a way in the face of the rules of magic that were set in stone, not even if they had the strongest mental strength and the most abundant mana. Moreover, this light was shining within a legendary level necromagic, which was even scarier. Hutton was very sure that the necromagic was of legendary level, as only magic of such caliber would suppress Stephen and him, two high-ranking archmages, so badly. Even mage apprentices would know that once legendary level necromagic was used, it would not permit the existence of even the faintest trace of light, as the powerful death energy would instantly devour any trace of it, the sun included one. Hence, Hutton could not understand how this mage Felix, who stood on the back of the humorous Wyrm at the moment, was able to achieve this. One could not blame Hutton for being so dumbfounded. After all, this was too unthinkable. Hutton aside, no other mage would be able to comprehend this, and the only ones who would were Lin Li's teammates who'd once charged into the Well of the Sun with him and Lin Li himself. This was a loophole in the dark decay that Lin Li found after countless research and experiments over 2 months. No matter how much of a genius Hutton and Stephen were, there was no way they would be able to understand it immediately. The dark decay was the closest to being a magical domain out of all level 20 necromagic spells, or in other words, the dark decay was actually a magical domain that incorporated a few basic rules. Once a fight reached the level of a magical domain, mental strength and mana became secondary, as the fight truly depended on one's understanding and grasp of rules. While Lin Li might not exactly be waiting for death given his abilities if it were another magical domain, there was no way he would be able to gain an advantage, either. Well, even though Lin Li was the closest person to reaching the legendary realm, he was still beneath it, and there was definitely a gap between him and the legendary powerhouses. Luckily, the dark decay was only nearing a magical domain, and incorporated but a few basic rules. When dealing with the soul of the high elf back then, Lin Li had spent 1,000,000 gold coins on an eternal light spell scroll to destroy the dark decay. Now, although he did not have the eternal light spell scroll, he had something that even the eternal light spell scroll could not compare with: the debris of the stars. The holy light was incredibly powerful and direct. In a split second, it tore through the endless darkness and allowed a mere illuminating spell to light up the whole abyss arena. Then, everything else was simple. Back in Sire Town, when Uchvalusi's magical domain was broken, not only did the humorous Wyrm start to melt, but Uchvalusi himself also fell from the legendary realm. From this, it was evident that the damage done to the creator of the domain was massive when the magical domain was destroyed. Even though the dark decay was not a true magical domain, the damage done to the 2 rainbow manticore kings was still severe when it was broken. All they heard was a pathetic cry before the 2 rainbow manticore kings fell to the floor. While sharing a soul gave them incredible strength, it also meant that they had to suffer together. The damage from the destruction of the dark decay was so severe that they lost their combat ability almost immediately as they lay helplessly on the floor, watching as the humorous Wyrm walked towards them. Then, a thunderous boom was heard. The humorous Wyrm's claws landed heavily, and the 2 rainbow manticore kings were reduced to a puddle of flesh and blood before they could even utter a sound. It is the aura of the Dragon of Destruction. The moment the black magical crystal landed in his hand, Lin Li knew he was right. It was the aura of the Dragon of Destruction coming from the magical crystal, an aura that Lin Li was incredibly familiar with. He had fought the Dragon of Destruction so many times back in the Endless World, so how could he not be familiar with this dragon aspect's aura? The second the magical crystal was in his hand, Lin Li knew that this trip to the abyss of Tharlan was not in vain. This was power left behind by the Dragon of Destruction, and once he entered the legendary realm, he would be able to use this power to master evilness and darkness rules and incorporate them into his own magical domain. After all, the strength of a magical domain lay in whichever rules were incorporated into it. Just take the Dark Decay for example. It merely had a few basic rules in it, so how could it compare with darkness and evilness? Once he was able to incorporate these two rules in his magical domain, it would be no less powerful than Sendro's magical domain. Unfortunately, the self-proclaimed soul trader Kanoris was too crafty, and would not let him in on too many secrets, or he would have been able to master the soul rule from him. Once he incorporated these three major rules, he would easily surpass Sendro's. Right, soul rule. Lin Li suddenly remembered that Mephistos proclaimed himself to be the Lord of Souls. Who knew if this legendary level spirit walker held a part of the soul rule? Looks like it's a good time to talk to Steven. The sudden thought reminded Lin Li of it. It did not escape his notice that Steven had sneakily retrieved a purple crystal from his pocket when Lin Li was destroying the Dark Decay using the holy light. Perhaps others could not feel it, but Lin Li did. The aura coming from the purple crystal was that of the Lord of Souls. How could this be? Hutton and Steven were still in extreme disbelief when Lin Li walked towards them. The shock was terrifying. The legendary level necromagic had been broken instantaneously, and that was not what people would expect an archmage to be able to achieve. It was obvious that the frightening necromagic had formed a magical domain. Only a stronger magical domain would be able to balance it out. No powerful magical equipment or casting technique could cover that unbridgeable gap. The two young men were both very talented archmages in the breezy plains. Coming from a family of magic and the dark blade, their knowledge and experience was not a little behind that of the old men who had been around for more than a century. The different exposure and information they had would be beyond the imagination of common men. However, even the two knowledgeable young archmages had no idea how an archmage would have the ability to break a magical domain. That was absolutely a subversion of their general knowledge. Even the most foolish mage apprentice would know that that should be impossible. Those impossibilities were displayed before their eyes. The young archmage that was standing on the back of the humorous WYRM had just used an illuminating spell to counter a legendary level necromagic, and slain two rainbow manticore kings instantaneously. There is no perfection in this world, let alone for magical domains. Once people find any fault with the seemingly perfect magical domain, it will become like a bubble with a multitude of colors, bursting upon gentle contact. Lin Li's voice was very gentle. No one knew whether he was speaking to Hutton and Steven or just to himself. The time the battle lasted was extremely short. It ended as quickly as it started, and was neither thrilling nor intense at all. As compared to the many battles Lin Li had experienced before, it was definitely not worth mentioning. Strictly speaking, the battle did not really concern Lin Li. The Dark Decay shattered like glass immediately after the holy light was released. To Lin Li, however, that neither thrilling nor intensive battle had a very special meaning. Lin Li had always been dealing with difficult battles with mere strength even when his opponents were in the legendary level, such as Ujfalusi and the Lich in Scar of Death. This was his first battle where he dealt with a magical domain directly. Nor was the victory of the battle or that legendary magical crystal too important. To Lin Li, the real reward was the process of the battle. The interaction between the holy light and the dark decay allowed Lin Li to gain a light taste of the legendary realm. That slight feeling was not to be belittled. In fact, the current Lin Li had already reached the limits of an archmage. His mental strength, skills in magic casting, as well as his knowledge in magic theory were at the maximum any archmage could achieve. Even without the use of magical equipment and the humorous WYRM, Lin Li was already the most invincible man under the legendary realm. Furthermore, when he was at the Scar of Death, he once used the all-knowing potion to break into the legendary realm temporarily to aid his battle with the Lich. That gave him valuable experience. Not to exaggerate, Lin Li already had one of his hands on the door leading to the legendary realm. If he were to give it a gentle push, Lin Li would be able to enter the dream realm. That last step, however, had been troubling Lin Li for a very long time, despite the fact that he had accumulated the maximum level of knowledge and skill set. The earlier battle enabled Lin Li to discover his deficiencies the moment he witnessed the clash between the dark decay and the holy light. That slight inspiration was like a bright lamp that lit the path ahead of him. Lin Li knew that that was the first time he felt so enlightened and clear about the road to the legendary realm. Apart from Lin Li, nobody else was aware of the benefits he'd gained from the battle just now. That was a period of epiphany. Although Lin Li was still an archmage who still could not make use of the force of the magical domain, he understood that he was dangerously close to the realm. All he needed now was time. A day would suffice for Lin Li to relate his life experience and knowledge together, and follow the clear path towards the legendary realm. But before this could happen, there would be a need to defuse the time bomb. Stephen. After using the power of Dispel to get rid of the vengeful spirits, Lin Li called the humorous WYRM back into the magic lamp. Alright, now that the trouble in the Abyss Arena is settled, let's head out from the entrance opposite us towards the Throne of Darkness. Lin Li's action brought out a spark in Stephen's gaze. Things seemed to be like Stephen had predicted. Felix's ability to summon the humorous WYRM was not due to personal strength, but with the help from a lamp-like magical equipment. It was rational for Stephen to be so certain about his predictions. Generally, the contract between a mage and a summoned creature was determined by the abilities of both parties. Under normal circumstances, an archmage would never have a chance to summon a legendary-level creature due to the huge disparity in ability. Even if the bond was signed by force, the legendary creature would be able to escape the restraint easily. Unless powerful magical equipment was involved to forcefully draw the difference in abilities together, it would be nearly impossible for one to establish such a contract. In Stephen's eyes, Felix had relied on that magical equipment to summon such a majestic humorous WYRM. For Stephen, who had been eyeing on the humorous WYRM, that was most delightful news. If Felix used his personal strength to complete the summoning process, it would be extremely difficult for him to snatch the humorous WYRM. Apart from killing the summoner to destroy the contract, he would need to be recognized by the WYRM as well. However, if the process had relied on magical equipment, things would be much simpler. The humorous WYRM would immediately become his possession as long as he could get his hands on the equipment. The thought of such a possibility brought sparks to Stephen's eyes. Oh, yes, you too. Lin Li walked towards them for a few steps before stopping again. From my past readings, we have to walk through a passageway after exiting the Abyss Arena. There would be countless vengeful spirits of deceased demons of the Abyss under the control of the Lord of Darkness present in the passageway. They would be waiting to tear apart any creature that dares to tread on the path. Then what should we do? Hutton asked anxiously. He had just survived a confrontation with numerous vengeful spirits, and had yet to recover from the formless terrors. Lin Li's words worried him. I have a way to deal with these vengeful spirits. But what? I can make use of the Transcend spell to disperse the vengeful spirits, but both of you should know that the Transcend spell would require me to stay focused throughout the recitation. Once the recitation gets interrupted, the effects of the spell would vanish. Hence, I am not to be distracted. Yeah, I understand what you mean, Hutton replied as he nodded his head knowingly. If there are going to be other demons or magical beasts in the passageway, Stephen and I will be in charge of getting rid of them. Mage Felix, you just have to do your best in maintaining the effects of the Transcend spell. That's great, Lin Li said as he fished out the robe of light from his ring of endless storm. He passed the robe to Hutton. You should wear this robe of light now. If you were to face too many vengeful spirits, transfer some mana into this robe and it will ensure that you won't be hurt by any of them for a period of 10 minutes. Thank you, Hutton said as he received the robe of light with trembling hands. As a high-level archmage, how would Hutton not be aware of the value of the robe of light? The 10 minutes concept would assure the person who donned the robe total safety from vengeful spirits when entering and exiting anywhere. Lin Li glanced at Stephen after passing the robe of light to Hutton. As for Mage Stephen, Lin Li hesitated exaggeratedly before fishing out the magic lamp from his pocket. Mage Stephen, I will leave this summoning lamp in your safekeeping for the time being. You can transfer your mana into the lamp to summon the humorous WYRM to deal with legendary-level enemies when we enter the passageway. However, please be mindful not to activate the lamp if there is no need to, or else. Lin Li did not say what were the consequences. he knew it would be a waste of effort. No. No problem. Steven's face lit up the moment he came into contact with the summoning lamp. This was unbelievable. Steven was still devising strategies to snatch the summoning lamp from Lin Li, and did not expect that fella to hand it over to him automatically. Steven really felt like laughing. He wanted to grin at his awesome luck and snicker over Felic's foolishness. How could there be such a stupid mage in this world who would hand a magic lamp that could summon a humorous WYRM to others? What a dumbass. Steven dissed Felic quietly. The ownership of a legendary-level creature like the humorous WYRM could grant any mage apprentice the right to challenge any legendary-level figure. No one would think of letting his closest kin or friend handle such a treasure. With that, he would not need to crush the crystal to summon that powerful greater demon for help. As long as he transferred mana into the magic lamp, the humorous WYRM would smash Felic into minced meat immediately. Alright, let's set off now. We should pass through this passageway and find that darn throne as quickly as we can, Lin Li said after passing the two powerful magical equipment to both men. Lin Li tidied his crumpled robe and started to lead them towards the passageway that was filled with countless vengeful spirits. Wait a minute, that was Steven with an insidious expression. He did not move after he received the summoning lamp. The glistening lamp turned brighter. My apologies, Mage Felic. I fear that you might not get to find the Throne of Darkness anymore. Steven, what's on your mind? Hutton, who became more serious, questioned the teammate cautiously. What's on my mind? Of course it's sending Mage Felic to death. I've seen too many morons, but this is my first time seeing a moronic mage that would hand his most powerful magical equipment to other people. Did you not expect that I could kill you with your own magical equipment? Steven ratted out slyly. The thirst for revenge had been suppressed within Steven's mind for a very long period of time. Who cared where Felic came from? Not to mention that Felic had been creating eccentric troubles for Steven, he was also a more capable mage. Steven had been feeling oppressed by this darn man ever since he'd met him in the Blackstone Mountains. Felic was the man who had been making Steven feel powerless despite having a good set of magic skills he had prided himself on. To a man that had received education from 3 legendary figures since he was young, as well as was the sole heir of the Dark Blade, it was not a matter he could tolerate. Steven gained immense pleasure from venting his deep hatred for Lin Li. He raised the summoning lamp in one hand and started to transfer mana into the lamp continuously. Damn it, Steven, control yourself. Please do not forget that we are here to find the Throne of Darkness. That is our only way to leave the abyss of Tharlan. Hutton urged Steven anxiously. How would he not know what Steven wanted to do? Hutton had witnessed the powers of the humorous WYRM. It had turned the 2 Rainbow Manticore Kings into minced meat with just a leg. Although the young president was powerful, he was not yet a legendary mage. There would be a possibility for him to be killed by the humorous WYRM. It would be too humiliating for such an invincible archmage to be killed by a creature he'd summoned. Throne of Darkness? Ha 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 ha, stop joking, Hutton. Do you really think that I'm here to find that darn throne with you guys? Ha 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 ha, let me tell you, Hutton. I knew of its location when we were in that forest just now. However, why should I reveal it and share Juresco's 3 relics with you? I only have one motive for coming here, to kill both of you. Steven's hideous laughter accompanied his act of transferring an endless stream of mana into the summoning lamp. Blinding light filled the entire abyss arena, and a force that threatened to tear the void started to spread. /T, darkness rushed up to Hutton. As a high-level archmage, Hutton knew very well that that was a force used to summon the humorous WYRM. When the force reached its maximum amount, the humorous WYRM would break out from the void and appear in the abyss arena, where it'd tear himself and the young president into pieces with its unbeatable strength. Steven, Lin Li spoke. He had been standing at his spot and looking at Steven with a very strange gaze. It was a gaze filled with not only sympathy, but also mockery. It was as though he was not looking at an enemy that was trying to summon a humorous WYRM to kill himself, but a moron that was about to commit an idiotic act. Ha 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 ha, are you going to ask for mercy? It is too late now. Even if you were to kneel before me, you wouldn't be able to change your fate of being killed by your own summoned creature. Not that, Lin Li replied as he shook his head, and his gaze turned more uneasy. I remember telling you to be careful not to transfer any mana into that summoning lamp. What? Stephen's expression took a turn, and he realized something was amiss. Unfortunately, it was too late. He had transferred a great amount of mana into the summoning lamp, and it activated the ManhwaRecap for sealing living creatures. At once, an unbearable force broke the space. However, the space did not bring them the humorous WYRM that Stephen wanted. Strictly speaking, it was not a real summoning process. It created a puff of thick fog that resembled gray clouds before an impending storm. The abyss arena became silent. There were neither gasps nor shrieks, just dead silence. Immediately after the dark fog emerged from the void, it twirled tightly around Stephen. They saw how the black fog changed into different forms continuously, while the man in the middle stood rooted to the ground. Stephen became like a wooden puppet that lost his human qualities. Hey, I've told you that long ago. You shouldn't add mana in so recklessly, Lin Li sighed and shook his head. Or else there would be a lot of trouble. Frankly speaking, Stephen had some really bad luck to have put his trust in a hypocrite. Who was Lin Li? He was a B*TCH that might plot against anyone that he gave his copper coin to. After all, the summoning lamp was a powerful piece of magical equipment. Anyone who knew Lin Li well, such the boss of Gilded Rose, Izura, would definitely not immediately accept Lin Li's offer to put his summoning lamp with him. His first reaction would be to inspect the lamp with a magnifying glass to see if there might be a bomb hidden in it. Unfortunately, Stephen was absolutely unaware of it. That caused him to step into Lin Li's trap very easily. He was right, the summoning lamp was still a summoning lamp. It would definitely be able to summon a powerful creature if one were to transfer mana into it. However, Lin Li did not tell Stephen that the summoning lamp did not just seal a humorous WYRM. In fact, there was also the former Lord of the Abyss within it. Stephen would never have dreamed that the bond Lin Li signed with the humorous WYRM would not require the powers of the magic lamp. In fact, the summoning lamp was just a living space for the humorous WYRM. It was lucky for Stephen be still of use to Lin Li, otherwise, he would not be just trapped by the Lord of Nightmares, but turn into minced meat under the feet of the humorous WYRM. This? What is this? Hutton gaped. He could not comprehend the ongoing events. Nothing much, I'm just borrowing Mage Stephen's dream, Lin Li replied as he retrieved the summoning lamp from Stephen. Of course, he would never reveal more. It concerned too many secrets. However, these words were enough to drown Hutton in his sweat. The treachery of the young president was beyond the imagination of common men. Every single word could be one of his traps, and every single action might let his enemies fall beyond redemption. Hutton knew he had made a wise decision to please the man after realizing the danger involved. Otherwise, he would be the other person being trapped in that black fog. But, Mage Felix, what should we do next? Are we going to leave Stephen here? Leave him here? How would there be such an easy way out? I've spent so much time digging this pit, and you want me to give all the space to Stephen? Now that the bastard lord had been watching the free show for quite a while, it's time to pay for the ticket now, Lin Li smirked as he found the crimson piece of soul fragment very quickly. Canoris, go and unlock all the cages. Damn it, how do you know? Canoris jumped on Lin Li's back. His voice was filled with disbelief. Are you curious about why I knew you can unlock these cages? Lin Li responded Canoris's shock with a smile. Because I want to know. F***CKU, Canoris cussed, but proceeded to get down from Lin Li's back. He started to open the cages with some unusual recitation. Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.